Chairperson Davis, want to recognize we have a new commissioner with us today. Most of us had an opportunity to meet him yesterday. His name's Reed Smith. He's, his ethics, all the stuff that's been turned in, hadn't cleared yet, so he'll get sworn in. We invited him to join us today, give a flavor to the field and get a good running early start. So Reed, welcome to the Wildlife Commission. We look forward to working with you and we're glad to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And so at this time, Chair.
Don't worry, he's between me and Brad, so he'll be just fine.
Calling this meeting of the Habitat Non-Game and Endangered Species meeting to order. Margo, can you get the roll, please?
Good morning. I'm going to do a roll call for our Habitat Non-Game Endangered Species Committee members. Committee Chair Kelly Davis.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Lane Zimmer.
Here.
Committee Member Tony Bobble. Committee Member Brad Standa.
Here.
Committee Member Hayden Rogers. Committee Member John Alexander.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. This time on Dr. Sarah Schweitzer.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Davis. And good morning, everyone. I want to introduce our first speaker, it's Sarah Finn, and she is our sea turtle biologist, a wild conservation biologist who works on sea turtles and diamondback terrapins and sometimes gopher frogs as well. And she got her bachelor's at Ohio Wesleyan and a master's of environmental management from Duke University. And she's been with us since 2011, and I'll let Sarah take it over and give you a presentation on sea turtle work in North Carolina.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to talk today about sea turtle conservation activities in North Carolina. Whoops, that's wrong. There we go. Okay, so sea turtles in North Carolina are here for two primary reasons. The adult females come to our over 300 miles of beach to lay their nests every summer. They can lay an average of 3 to 4 nests a season with around 100 eggs in each clutch. And then also the juveniles are found foraging in our coastal waters nearly year round. Okay, there are 7 species of sea turtle found globally, 5 of which can be found in North Carolina. The loggerhead and the green turtle are listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened, and the Kemp's Ridley, leatherback, and hawksbill are listed as endangered. Sea turtles are a highly migratory species. They can be found globally all throughout the Atlantic. Turtles in our waters spend some part of their time, either they originate or they spend other parts of their lives in different parts of the Atlantic. For example, Kemp's Ridleys are primarily found in the western Gulf of Mexico, and leatherbacks that we found in North Carolina have had tags that were applied in places like Panama, French Guiana, and Trinidad, and they travel through North Carolina waters on their way as far north as Nova Scotia, so they can really travel. The North Carolina Sea Turtle Project has 2 components. The Nest Monitoring Program monitors the beaches every summer. They find nests, protect them, mark them off, and do post-hatching inventory. And the Stranding Network monitors in response to reports of dead, sick, and injured turtles throughout North Carolina. Both of these projects collect data, and we share with our federal partners, U.S. Coastal Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service, and we use those data to assess recovery goals and provide technical guidance. The Sea Turtle Project in North Carolina is one of the first programs in the non-game section. It's been going on since the 80s. The project has since expanded over the years to include statewide coverage. We coordinate, 2 biologists coordinate over 2,000 volunteers in the state to conduct the work. And we also coordinate with other cooperators from the federal, state, and local levels, like Coast Guard, National Park Service, state parks, etc. Volunteer hours and miles are tracked, and we can use those to convert to in-kind for federal funds. And every year, our sea turtle volunteers contribute the equivalent of $1 million in all of the work that they do. Here we've got a table that summarizes the 2023 nesting season in North Carolina. As you can see, loggerhead turtles are the most abundant nesting species we have. Over 1,600 nests laid just last summer, followed by green turtles. We have low-level nestings for Kemp's Ridleys and leatherback turtles. Hawksbill sea turtles, we've only ever recorded 2 nests in North Carolina, and both of those nests were laid by the same female in Cape Hatteras back in 2015. And that represented the northernmost extent, or the northernmost record of hawksbills nesting in the Western Atlantic. These photos, you can see some of the hard work that our volunteers conduct every summer, from discovering new nests, marking them off, protecting them through incubation. In the center there is an example of how a post-hatching inventory is conducted, where they'll pull out all the contents and determine the hatch success of each nest. They also do a fair amount of interaction with the public directly on the beach, which is a great opportunity to provide education about sea turtle conservation issues. Here's a graph of loggerhead nests through the years, ever since standardized statewide monitoring was set up back in the mid-90s. You can see there's a lot of variation between years. That's because the same individuals do not nest typically in consecutive years. Usually it's every other year or every 3rd year. So there's a lot of variation there. But if you'll pay attention to the green line, you'll notice that it does have an upward trend. This represents a 3% growth rate, and we are hopeful that that is indicative of over 40 years of conservation actions that have been taking place for sea turtles. It is consistent with what our other neighboring states are seeing, so we think that that could be the case. Loggerheads, for example, take 35 years to reach maturity, so it has taken this long for us to see the benefits of all of that hard work in the last 40 years. Okay, here's a graph that depicts when the nesting season is for North Carolina. It starts in May and occurs all the way through mid-November. The red line represents when nests are laid in North Carolina. You'll notice there are peaks in June and July. That's the highest nesting season. And then the green line is when those same nests are emerging. It takes between 60 and 80 days for those nests to emerge, dependent upon temperature. So there's a peak there in August and early September for nest emergence. So these key time periods between nests being laid and nests emerging really overlaps with the highest use for tourists on the beach. So that can lead to some habitat conflicts. Sea turtles nesting and hatchlings face several threats on land. Coastal development, placement of objects on nesting beaches like beach mats can take away nesting habitat for these. While ADA access is definitely important, there are ways that we can sort of plan to make sure that it has minimal impacts on turtles with the layout and the timing of installation. Beach nourishment projects that occur during the summer can also remove nesting habitat, as they have often long segments of these pipes that block access for turtles as they try to come ashore and nest up near the dunes. So that's another thing that we sort of try to recommend occurring outside of the nesting season. Beach driving can obscure nests so that our volunteer operators are unable to find them. And night driving in particular can cause issues, especially for hatchlings and nesting turtles, and this is when they're most likely to be emerging to nest, or when they're coming out of their nest and going back to the water. So beach driving can be another impact on our turtles. And so to sort of combat these threats, we work closely with other resource agencies, Division of Coastal Management, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we make recommendations to avoid or minimize activities that negatively impact our nesting sea turtles and their habitat. Nighttime artificial lighting is another big issue that we've been dealing with. This is a photo in Atlantic Beach, taken from the beach, so you can see all that light is visible from the beach. This is particularly problematic for hatchlings, as they're most likely to emerge at night. And their natural progression from their nest to the ocean can be disrupted by artificial lighting, causing them to misorient and go the wrong way. They can end up in streets, in pools, in parking lots, things like that. Nesting females are also impacted by artificial light. Again, they tend to emerge at night to lay their nests. So on their way back to the ocean, they rely on visual cues to find the ocean again, and they can become disoriented and end up in places that can be problematic, like this nesting loggerhead who found her way on Highway 12 in Ocracoke. Thankfully, the National Park Service was able to intercept her and get her back to the ocean before she wandered too far into the road and was struck. So we and our volunteer groups have been working really hard with towns and peers, even directly with homeowners during the season. We just turned our lights off, but working with towns especially to switch problematic lighting for more turtle-friendly lighting. The image on the left is an example of a lighting fixture in Atlantic Beach, like the photo I just showed you. It's actually facing directly out towards the ocean. So all that light is being sent out toward the ocean, visible from the beach, which was causing problems for the hatchlings in the area. And the town worked with the energy company and the volunteers to switch out for the image on the right, that fixture, which is an LED, and it's got turtle-friendly wavelength lighting, and it's also directed downward. Making these sorts of switches have the added benefit of not only helping sea turtles, it helps migratory birds, other wildlife, and since it's LEDs, lower energy costs, which is good for the towns. Okay, so switching gears to the stranding program, this is a graph depicting the strandings broken down by month. In the black bars are what we saw this past season in 2023. The gray represent the 10-year average. There's a lot of variation depending on temperatures and when things occur during the year. But you'll note that there are sea turtle strandings that occur in North Carolina all throughout the year. So we're responding to things even in the winter time. And then the other seasonal threat patterns have to do with the variation throughout the different months. Okay, here's a table showing just the numbers, the total stranding numbers. In 2023, we had 838 stranded turtles. And broken down by species, you can see that green turtles, particularly juveniles, are the most abundant stranded turtle that we respond to, followed by Kemp's Ridleys and loggerheads. And leatherbacks and hawksbills are much more rare to come upon in North Carolina. The stranding program responds to dead, sick, and injured sea turtles and tries to come up with a probable cause of why that turtle may have stranded. Some of the threats that they face in the water include boat strikes, incidental capture and fishing gear and dredges, power plant, disease, exposure to pollution in the environment, and cold stunning. And I'll talk a bit more about that last one. Cold stunning events is one of the biggest things that we respond to. Cold stunning, as sea turtles are reptiles, as you all know, they're dependent on the temperature of their environment to regulate their body temperature. And so when water temperatures drop below 11 degrees Celsius, they become unable to swim or dive, and they sort of just float to the surface in a catatonic state. When winds and currents are favorable to blow them ashore, our stranding network cooperators and volunteers are able to respond to these animals, and often they can be found in large numbers, as you can see here. These are images from an event we had in 2016 where we had 2,000 stranded turtles in the month of January alone.
What do you do with it, Sarah?
I'll talk a little bit about that, but yes, we work with the live ones, go to our rehab partners, and the dead ones we collect data, and depending on where they are, they're even married or allowed to be with us now. Here's a table that summarizes the previous 10 years of cold stunning in North Carolina. I'll just have you note the total. So we've had almost 5,000 cold stun turtles in the past 10 years in North Carolina. The largest, as I mentioned, was juvenile green turtles, over 4,000. The 5,000 were juvenile green turtles. And that's because there are a lot of juvenile green turtles in our waters. Their populations seem to be increasing in their nesting beaches down in Florida and the Caribbean. And they also tend to be smaller in our waters. They return back to North Carolina at a smaller size than juvenile loggerheads, for example. So their smaller body size is more susceptible to these rapid drops in temperature, which leads them to cold stun more easily. Again, our live turtles are taken to our rehab partners for care, and they have an over 80% success rate of survival to release. And we do, for this season, 2023-24, because the full sunny season usually spans, the end of the year. We have around 80 turtles still in rehab. This table does not reflect, the released turtles that we had yesterday, and there's actually a boat headed offshore from Topsail early this morning, so they should be entering warmer waters at any moment now. So, again, we're responding to all these dead, sick, and injured turtles. And what do we do with all of them? We take that opportunity to participate in collaborative research. We collect samples from the dead turtles. We take measurements. We take a suite of data from every stranded turtle. We tag live turtles that helps us understand patterns of movement. And we participate in other projects with universities and other states to help us better understand sea turtle biology, aging, behavior, and genetics. And this last one is an example of an ongoing genetics project that we've been participating in with Georgia and South Carolina since 2010. This is a map depicting nesting locations from a single nesting female. We're able to extract the DNA fingerprint from an egg from every nest that is laid and assign a genetic fingerprint. So we know that this female in particular has been nesting at least since the project began in 2010. And we've seen her as recently as last summer. And you can just see the span of nesting. It demonstrates that our turtles that are nesting in North Carolina are not just our turtles. They are also nesting in South Carolina, Georgia, and even northern Florida. This is what's known as the Northern Recovery Unit for the loggerhead turtle. So this can just show you some turtles tend to nest a little bit more clustered and others have these large spans. But that old adage of they return to the beach they were born on, it's not exactly true. And at this point, I want to thank you for having me and I'll take any questions.
I may not have this exactly right, but the commercial fishing industry, don't they have some type of federal permit that protects the turtle?
There are, so for the gillnet fishery, for example, they have an incidental take permit that allows them a certain level of take for sea turtles in North Carolina. Correct.
Have one. I noticed in the conservation plan that you provided us that it listed counties and municipalities and lighting agreements. And the picture of the species it was, loggerhead, I think on Ocracoke, made me think about Ocracoke and Hyde County. And I remember seeing that Hyde County was not an area that had a light agreement. At Ocracoke, most of the lights are not on the ocean because that's national seashore. So the lights tend to be on sound. How far does light impact?
That's a really good question. Light can impact, so it's usually when you extinguish the brightest light, the next brightest light then becomes the problem. So for example, down in Florida where they do have a statewide lighting ordinance where light is not allowed to touch the beach, they're still experiencing some issues from sky glow from distant cities, particularly for the larger cities further back. So even if, the best thing to do is to get as much light as we can off the beach, but it seems like there probably will still be an issue, at least a low level issue with sky glow.
And a follow-up to that is, what are the effective strategies that you folks have figured out to fence, but encourage like your beach and others to go along with light restrictions?
Yeah, just it takes working with each individual town to see what would work best for them. They're all very different. So we've got really great volunteer groups that are working directly with the towns. They have close relationships with them, and they're able to figure out what might work best. Ideally, we have something like a statewide ordinance that would be like a framework like Florida has that would provide consistency. But in the interim, it would be great to just get those municipalities working on what would work best for their towns.
Okay. Thank you. And also kudos on 2,000 volunteers. There's a lot of work behind that.
They do a lot of work. We couldn't do what we do without them. So we really appreciate it.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm gonna go into our next subject, which is right along the same lines, and you all got a copy of a couple conservation plans before the meeting, and One of them is the Sea Turtles Conservation Plan, and the other one is the Virginia Big-eared Bat Conservation Plan. And you're gonna have to do this. So for the people who haven't been through this before, a couple of new folks here, according to General Statute 133, 113, 133, 113, 333, we are required to write conservation plans for the listed species. And so with the sea turtle conservation plan, so for the first plan, and I wanted y'all to talk about is the sea turtle conservation plan, and that really teed me up well with Sarah's presentation. We are finished with our internal review, and the sea turtle plan has gone through the Non-Game Wildlife Advisory Committee review, and we responded to some of the edits suggested from that committee, and now it's with you all the Hinges review. And so within the plan, just super quickly, we do outline where the turtles occur in North Carolina. So they occur in these marine waters and on our coastal beaches. As Sarah noted, there are over 300 miles of beaches in North Carolina where these occur. And within North Carolina, we have 2 species that are listed as threatened federally and state, and 3 that are listed as endangered federally and state listed. Sarah outlined some of the threats on land. We have several threats, including the artificial lighting, increased human presence, blocked access to nesting beaches, and decreased hatching success from predation, construction, and some effects from sea level rise that we are working with. And then the threats in water include incidental capture by fishing, impingement in hopper dredges, collision with watercraft, pollution and disease exposure, including pollution that includes some of the plastics that are in our waters, and changes in water temperatures, the cold study we talked about. Next. So we're taking lots of conservation actions, and so Sarah and Matthew Godfrey and all the volunteers and all of our partners are working super hard on these issues. So a lot of these we are in the midst of addressing. And the goal, of course, is recovery of populations by protecting them from the threats and maintaining and enhancing the functionality of their habitats. And so we have specific actions that we're working on, of course, continued monitoring and protecting nests so that we see no decline in trends over time. Monitor trends in the number of stranded turtles relative to in-water abundance. Maintain at least 65% hatching success and no more than 20% predation of eggs over any 10-year period. We want to increase protection of terrestrial nesting habitat through development of a Fish and Wildlife Service habitat conservation plan. Reduce in-water threats, including bycatch and vessel strikes. We'll establish indices for monitoring these threats. Respond to mass stranding events. And last, develop and implement local and state legislation for protection of sea turtles. So those are some of our key actions in the plan. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Davis for our next action.
We need a motion and a second to release this plan for a 30-day comment. Not a vote, just a committee motion. Motion. Second, generally the committee approves of that action. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on this about the plan?
Oh, any more discussion?
One thing that stood out for me was that our enforcement and marine fisheries enforcement doesn't have authority to enforce federal regulations in North Carolina waters because of the lack of state legislation.
Correct.
So we have a model for proposing that and moving that through.
That is something that would be great to address. One of the only states that does not have that coordination. And so, yeah, that would be another action we can work on in the plan is noted.
And one other thing, looking at the list of beaches and towns, I noticed Figure 8 Island has nothing on the chart.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure they do, but I tried to look it up with the Figure Eight Homeowners Association this morning and it's not publicly available. I'm staying there at my dad's house. I can stop by the homeowners association office and check on that. But I'm pretty sure they do not allow beach furniture overnight, no driving on the beach, things like that. I'm pretty sure they have those, so I'll try to get that information to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
There,
Yes.
do we have any kind of statistic on bycatch, on fishing, inshore waters and offshore waters? That divided all over, inside the inlets, sound, estuary,
Yeah,
opposed to offshore.
yeah, so great question. I had to refer to Sarah, the other Sarah here for details, but we do have a program where we ask for reporting, especially with recreational fishing, to report any catch and then release. As far as commercial, they also are to report any catches. And so those data are available, and I'm not sure if I have them somewhere that it's pointed out. Mhm.
Break it down. Right.
Right.
Most of them, they're calling it nets for drowned. They're released there.
Right, and then one thing that wasn't mentioned, but it is in the plan about the TEDs, so the turtle exclusion devices that are required to be on certain nets, and those have been very successful. That's one.
Yeah, I had a question, how successful, they help a little bit, but not a whole
Yeah.
lot.
I think from what I understand, they're very successful. Mhm.
So, as I understand it, North Carolina was the only state in the nation has issued the permit. That controls.
For the incidental take, no, we're not the only state. That incidental take permit is through NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service. And so each state can work with NOAA for incidental take. We're not the only state.
Madam Chair, we can have a motion and second, but can you call for vote for the record, please?
Sarah, do we want to vote on that or just? approve it?
Just for, vote for approval or not to move it to the 30-day. We don't, it's not regulatory in nature.
So we'll take a vote.
Yeah.
Is everybody in favor of, or on the committee in favor of moving this to 30-day public comment period, say aye? Opposed?
Okay, so any other questions?
Yes.
I've just got a topic, and I'm not sure who would be best, unless you would even know, but lately about the right whale. And they're talking about the speed of vessels and restriction on the size. And didn't know, do we have a representative this meeting with either NOAA, with the federal government, and where that stands?
Yeah, our agency doesn't have jurisdiction over marine mammals. And so we currently don't have a biologist working with right whales or porpoises or other species. But we do work with NOAA, and so we know about those regulations and concern. Of course, we work with the other biologists. Those restrictions would benefit sea turtles and many other marine species. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or getting
I
to.
said, no, it's updated. Do you know what's, we played with boats, 60 feet, and then it says it'll be like 35 feet bigger. Would have to travel basically at
7
miles, at 7 knots for 60 miles.
And I mean, it would basically destroy the fishing. Recreational fishing, colorful fishing.
And they're not maybe this summer, potentially the Biden administration enacted. I mean, it's like, so I don't know if any of the states, but must be one of the states most affected. I know it's kind of off the subject of the right whale is a protected species, and that's going to be.
Like everything else, like it's screwed up. But what, it's, I don't know exactly where it's saying about it. It's very concerning. It would absolutely destroy it. But. And I think the question's been asked about how many strikes have been in the white whale on Carolina coast. I can't find anybody that has where any. I've had several people about that. So they're like, oh, North Carolina.
How do you use folks? I mean, I can, I can see how. In the Atlantic Ocean.
I mean, off 50 miles.
Right, I mean, who's gonna track you and chase you and radar you?
There's been very few strikes, apparently, it's something that a lot of folks don't know about. Again, most people, kind of one of the larger states for both manufactured and. I just didn't know that this is something that they're involved in the states. For each region.
Yeah, the biologist who works with marine mammals is with Division of Marine Fisheries. So that's their jurisdiction.
Great comments. Any others? Move on to the bigger event.
Yeah, so the only other conservation plan that I want to discuss just super quickly is the Virginia Big Eared Bat Conservation Plan. And where we are with that has been through all the internal and Kenji's reviews. We just finished the public review. And so we're at the point to request approval of the plan. And just to give you a quick update that the public comments were overwhelmingly positive for the plan. And we had a few editorial comments and a couple that asked for a little bit more information about white nose syndrome and impact of some forest management activities on bats. And so we added a little bit more about that in the conservation plan, but overall it wasn't substantially changed after public comment. And so our next ask is to have this plan approved.
Okay, wants the committee to approve moving the Virginia Big Eared Bat Conservation Plan to the full commission. Sorry. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed?
And so I'll just quickly introduce our next speaker, Dr. Heather Evans. She's our geneticist who is coordinating all of our genetic work in our agency, and she also leads our research committee.
All right, good morning. I can click it if I'm wrong. I'll the right. It's better. Okay, okay. Thank you. Good morning. So yes, today I'm going to talk about a study we did comparing eDNA survey methodology to electrofishing. This was a study that we did funded by NCDOT. So we do these management surveys quite a lot to determine presence, absence of a species, where it is. All of these surveys inform everything from management plans to conservation plans, delisting plans, recovery plans. And there's different ways that we can do these surveys. So some of them that you may have heard about before, electrofishing, that can be on a boat or be a backpack, snorkel surveys, transect surveys, gill netting surveys. So there's a lot of ways that we can collect this information to inform all of our plans. So backpack electrofishing is one of the ones that we're going to focus on today. All of these survey methods have their pros and cons. So for backpack electrofishing, some of the pros are that in addition to information on presence, absence of species, we can also get information on how many of the fish or mussels or whatever it is that we're looking for there are. We also get information on the ages that are present. We can do visual health checks on the population. And we also get an assemblage of the other species that are present at those sites that we're surveying. The cons are that it requires a lot of people, a lot of time, and thus it's pretty expensive. Not pretty expensive, but it can be expensive. A new methodology that's been coming up in use is eDNA or environmental DNA. So environmental DNA are samples that are taken from the environment. That can be water, it can be soil. And in that sample is a lot of DNA that has been slept off from the species that are in that area. So it comes from skin cells or mucus layers, comes from metabolic waste, fecal material, and all of that is already in that water or soil sample. So we can use molecular methods to amplify or sequence the DNA that is present and get information on what species are present in that method.
that the same method where I've seen like people, you know, getting DNA from someone walking on the beach, picking up sand, it's the same,
Yeah,
pretty modern.
yeah, pretty modern, cutting edge new technology. And so what our question is we wanted to know if we could use eDNA for management purposes. Is it reliable? Would it be effective from a cost perspective? And so there'd been one study that had looked at this question. This was a study published in 2017 by Evans et al. Not me, Evans, a different Evans. And they did this study using brook trout. So they went to 6 streams. This was in Wisconsin. They looked at electrofishing versus eDNA. What they found is that they had positive detections using electrofishing in 5 of the 6 streams. Using eDNA, they had positive detections in 4 of the 6 streams. These studies were done 2 years apart. So they did electrofishing, they came back 2 years later and took the eDNA samples. And so that 4 out of 6 in the eDNA, they did point out in the paper that there had been a habitat alteration in those intervening 2 years. So it was possible that the fish were actually no longer there. For electrofishing, they spent 30 person-hours.
It's showing.
Okay, and for eDNA, it took 6.8 person-hours, so it was faster to do the eDNA. The cost per stream was $68, and then the cost per eDNA was $75, so it was a little bit more expensive to do the eDNA. So if you look at all of this data, you think, well, the detection rate was pretty similar. It was faster, but it cost a little bit more money, and you're losing all of the information that you get from electrofishing surveys. So if you look at this, you kind of think, I don't know that eDNA is really worth it from a management perspective. However, this was done with a brook trout that's still a common species. And our question was, what if you did this with something that's harder to find? So something that's rare, maybe something that's endangered. And so that's what our study focused on. So we used Roanoke log perch for this study as our model. This is a 4 to 6 inch darter, so it's a lot smaller. It's also federally and state listed, so it occurs less often. This occurs in the Roanoke and Chowan River basins, and there was already a previously developed assay for Roanoke log perch. So whenever you do an eDNA study, you have to develop an assay that's species specific. And so since this one already had an assay, we didn't have to spend time developing that. We were able to focus on our management survey questions. So we designed a sampling methodology looking at 23 sites. We used historical records to make these determinations. And using those historical records, we found 8 presumed positive sites where we had seen Roanoke log perch before. We chose 8 presumed negative sites where we had never seen them, and then 7 exploratory sites where no one had actually looked before, but it had suitable habitat and thought they might. We started, so we had electrofishing here. When we do the electrofishing, you can see this is our TR Russ. He's wearing this backpack shocker. It runs a current through the water and stuns the fish. We're able to corral the fish into this 15-foot seine net. We pull the net and then take an inventory of all the different species that were collected and how many of each species were collected. And so for this study, we took, it's not advancing. Thank you. For this study, we took eDNA samples on the same day so that we eliminated any variables that might be coming from habitat alterations. We actually would collect eDNA before we did the electroshocking, and that was for a couple reasons. 1, to reduce any chance of contamination in the molecular work, and 2, so we wouldn't scare the fish away from the electroshocking. So we would take 3 1-liter samples at each site, 1 from the left bank, 1 from the center, and 1 from the right bank. And then these were kept on ice for the rest of the day while we did the rest of the survey, and then transferred to a freezer that evening. When we were ready to process them, we would take them out of the freezer. They were put using a vacuum pump onto a filter. The DNA was then extracted off of this filter, and that assay that I mentioned earlier was performed, amplifying, that's okay, amplifying any of the Roanoke log perch DNA that might be present in the sample. So what did we find? So these are our sites that we found positive electrofishing detections for. We had 1 positive site, and that was just north of Madison. Comparatively, using eDNA, we had 9 positive detections. That included 6 of our presumed positive sites, 2 of the exploratory sites, and 1 of our presumed negative sites. So I'm gonna take a minute and talk about this presumed negative site where we got a positive detection. So fortuitously, this was the first survey site that we did in the whole study, so we hadn't been anywhere else. So we don't think that this positive detection is due to contamination, because none of the equipment had been in any positive Roanoke Log Bridge waters. The other thing is that part of that assay that we use has a quantification aspect, so that we can tell how much starting material was in the sample to begin with, as far as DNA. And we actually had higher amounts of DNA in the samples taken from this site than at several of our presumed positive sites. So it was a pretty good signal there. It wasn't particularly low. And then thirdly, I'm going to point out is this dash line here represents the Lindsay Bridge Dam that was removed in 2020. I think a lot of you have heard this before. So this was removed, they built a rock weir. And so this hopefully allowed fish passage upstream. And what we saw, I mentioned before that we had 2 positive detections at exploratory sites. And those are these 2 sites right here that are just upstream of Lindsay Bridge Dam. So that indicates that the fish were able to make use of that rock weir and move upstream. This site in the that we also found that was a presumed negative site is also upstream of the Lindsay Bridge Dam. It's a fair distance, it's about 36 miles. However, we collected these samples 3 years after the dam was removed. So that's not an unreasonable amount of time to expect that the log perch could have migrated that far. So considering all of those factors, we do think this is actually a new detection of Roanoke log perch. And we'll explore that further, but those are the results. So we had better detections for sure using eDNA than electrofishing. What did it look like in terms of costs? So this shows our actual person hours, our actual costs that we spent on this project. And what you can see is that we had a 57% reduction in time savings using eDNA versus electrofishing, and a 31% cost savings for eDNA versus electrofishing. Now, this was kind of a pilot project for us as we got all our ducks in a row, and so we figure that we can optimize both of these a little further. The electrofishing, we can optimize now. We know how many people we actually need to take out per stream, so that time and cost can come down a little bit. We spent quite a bit of time optimizing the eDNA assay. One of the things that we did was a lot of testing of the assay on other co-occurring species. We wanted to make sure that the assay only amplified Roanoke log perch, not anything else that might be in the stream. And there's also optimization in the assay itself and the temperatures that you want to run it at to make sure that we're getting the most robust amplification possible. So if we were to take those same samples and rerun them now that the assay has been optimized, it would significantly reduce the time needed. So we think if we were to optimize both of these, we would see a time savings of 77% and a cost savings of 54%. So back to our initial question, is eDNA useful for management surveys? So some of the pros, we saw that in this study, detections of rare or elusive species were much higher using eDNA than backpack electrofishing. Some of the things that I didn't talk about that I want to point out real quick is that eDNA enables surveys in difficult to reach areas. So these are streams that maybe are too small to get a boat in, but too deep to go backpack electrofishing in, to go wading in. You can still use eDNA. It also causes less stress to the animals since you aren't handling them. When we're talking about listed species, that's a consideration. And then as our study showed, it reduces time and money spent on the surveys. However, we are losing some of that information that I mentioned before. We're losing information on the age class, we're losing information on how many of them are there. We're losing the opportunity to do visual health checks. And so what we think is that eDNA is a really powerful tool that we can use to efficiently survey large geographic areas and then use those detections to focus in our electrofishing efforts. So for example, that presumed negative site where we found a new detection, we can now go back and that's a place where we really want to focus our electrofishing efforts to confirm that detection. So upcoming plans for eDNA within the agency. This assay that we now have developed, Roanoke log perch, has been proposed for delisting, and as part of that delisting plan, eDNA surveys are included. We're also considering using eDNA to help establish zero baselines for reintroductions of species under safe harbor. Specifically, we're looking at spot fin chub. And then lastly, we're developing additional assays that can be used for other species that are hard to detect. We have a project coming up this coming fiscal year for Tower Burst Finding Mussel. And to be able to use that assay to help us identify new brood populations for Tower Burst. So with that, I'll just take a minute to thank our research partners, again, NCDOT, who funded this project for us. And then we had a whole bunch of help in the field to do those electrofishing surveys over the summer. Lots of biologists from other districts came to help, as well as some volunteers and operators from external agencies. And then my lab technician, Andy Barker, who processed all of the DNA samples. And with that, I can take any questions.
How far downstream will a sufficient quantity of DNA travel to show up here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it seems to depend a lot on, there's several factors. What's the flow of the river? What's the temperature at the time? How many fish are at your zero location? And so that's something that we would need to study further. Where we have a detection, we know the fish are here, and then take samples at different differences downstream. So I can't answer that in this particular system because we haven't done those studies. And the results vary a lot from paper to paper, depending on the system that we're looking at.
Like Dr. Evans back, I think there are a lot of questions in the room. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Doug got a question here.
Yes, sir.
Stand up.
Do we do all the lab work in-house? Do we have the own machinery and equipment to do that?
We do, yeah. We currently use the molecular lab at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. So we're on display behind the glass window at the museum. We actually have a second lab in the basement though that we do these eDNA extractions in because it's considered low quantity, low quality. So we have a dedicated space for that, but it's all in-house.
Okay.
I guess a quick final comment was a great move on the commission to bring Dr. Evans and her technical expertise and his assistance on. Imagine all the use of this moving forward. So it's pretty mind-boggling. That was excellent. Thank you. Does anybody have any additional topics for him to? Not, we're going to adjourn this meeting.
Meeting. As a reminder, this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. At this, I'd like to call on Margo Minkler for our roll.
Do a roll call for our birds and waterfowl members. Committee Chair John Holton.
Here.
Committee Vice Chair Wes Seaver.
Here.
Committee Member Kelly Davis.
Here.
Committee Member Landry Center.
Here.
Committee Member John Alexander.
Here.
Committee Member Mike Alvin.
Here. Thank you, Margo. Next we'll be hearing from our wildlife chief, Brad Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I'm going to go over, this will actually be a voting exhibit tomorrow, Commission. This is the Peregrine Falcon Take exhibit, Exhibit H. These are basically the same conditions we've had for Peregrine Falcon Take for the last few years. This North Carolina's allocation this year was for 5 Peregrine Falcons, and then staff recommends that we accept the federal recommendation for our allocated take. With that, that's all, unless there's questions about Peregrine Take. Yes,
How many have we taken in the past? Is it usually or?
I don't think we've taken 5. How many did we take last year?
Last year we did 4, and so it varies. Sometimes we do the 5. We had allocated one allocated.
Do you ever like golden eagle? Is there a golden eagle?
No.
There's one.
Not thinking we don't do the most effective, sometimes
Yeah, the Golden Eagle Take with Falcon is a whole different ballgame that they're working on. But Peregrines, we do take. And keep in mind, based on the conditions, the Peregrine Take is only east of 17, and they can take juveniles, and they can't take birds. So, but they're fairly successful. These are they're taking the migrating.
Any more questions for Brad? All right, moving on. Next I call on our migratory bird coordinator, Doug Howell.
Good morning, everyone. So first off, I'm gonna go ahead and cover the staff recommended seasons for our 2024-25 migratory game bird seasons and our extended falconry seasons. I'll touch briefly on some of the federal frameworks, and then where appropriate, I'll make some reference to some of the public responses we received as part of our public comment period. All right, starting with exhibit F3, these are your webless seasons for doves, the rail species, gallinals and moorhens, woodcock and snipe. And I will make mention that there have been no federal framework changes for 2024-25. So the seasons and season structures you see here are similar to what you approved for 2023-24. I will make note, you'll notice the start of dove season occurs this year on September the 2nd. That's Labor Day and a Monday. Every 5 years, this happens where, we can't actually hunt migratory game birds before September 1st, and every 5 years, September 1st falls on a Sunday. So just make note of opening day of dove season. We got a lot of negative comments on that. Dove hunters really don't like this situation, but fortunately, this only occurs once every 5 years. So any questions on the webless season? Before I move on to water belt.
Doug, the morning dove study, we're looking at the numbers there. You got any brief update on that?
So I think what you're referring to is a new model to estimate dove abundance. Yes, so that's in the filing process now. We passed a recommendation, or the Eastern Management Unit Dove Technical Committee presented a recommendation to the Atlantic Flyway Council this past March to use the new integrated population model, which uses a lot more data to estimate dove abundance. What we've seen so far is using the IPM rather than the discrete logistic model that's been used in the past. Dove abundance has increased when using the old data applied to the new model, but the long-term decline in doves in the Eastern Management Units are still there. So that's a concern, and that's probably what we'll focus on here going forward in terms of dove management.
And what's the time period for that, addressing that concern?
Well, we're starting on it now. We're starting with this new model. We're able to look at things a little bit differently. So we'll go through all of our data streams and see if we can, point a finger at whether it's productivity or habitat related or something else. So that's ongoing.
Thank you for that.
All right, moving on to the waterfowl seasons. We continue to offer our special September seasons for Canada goose and for September teal. Those seasons are similar to what you approved last year. Moving to the general duck season, there's been no federal framework changes in bag limits. The species-specific bag limits we have in place will apply going forward to both the inland and coastal duck hunting zones. So a little deeper dive on our duck seasons. As I mentioned, they're structured similarly to what we've done, throughout this. We're on the 4th year of zoning right now. So the season structure is similar. We offer 2 days of hunting in the coastal zone for the first segment and 3 days in the inland zone. For both zones, the second segment encompasses most of the month of November. And then for the third segment, what we do is just back up those remaining days from the latest closing date of January 31st, on whatever day that falls. So make note that, again, this year, the 31st falls on a weekday. This year it's Friday. So for the third segment, unfortunately, we'll have to begin and end that segment on a weekday versus a Saturday, which is proved to not be too popular with our duck hunters, but it is what it is. So for Begansers, coots, and sea ducks, those seasons overlap the general duck season. I mentioned one minor framework change for Canada geese for the regular season. For the Northeast Hunt Zone, that zone is set up to basically protect our Atlantic population of Canada goose and in long-term declines. We had a moderate season in 2023-24. This year, that season moved to a restrictive season, meaning they're still offered 30 days, but the bag limit is going to be reduced from 2 geese daily to 1 goose daily. That's the only really framework change to discuss. In terms of our Brant light goose, including the conservation order season and tundra swans, all those seasons are set up similarly to what you approved in 2023-24. And finally, our youth and veterans military waterfowl days. You know, we've, in the past, since we've been offered the Veterans Military Waterfowl Days, we've held those days concurrently with the Youth Waterfowl Days. This year, if we continue, or if you continue to hold those days in the month of February, on the 2 Saturdays following the end of duck season, I will point out that the end of duck season this year is on a Friday, so according to federal frameworks, we have to be within 14 days of the general duck season to hold those youth and veterans days in February. So this year, the youth and veterans military waterfowl days were occurred the day, Saturday after the close of the duck season. We received a lot of negative comments on that, but the framework's kind of been covered some of this, and we continue to offer those days, those special days on Saturdays. That concludes the waterfowl seasons. This will take any comments or questions on the staff recommendations at this point.
Any comments, questions? Vote on that tomorrow.
Okay. Moving on to the extended falconry seasons, that's exhibit F4. Again, these seasons are set up similarly to what we've done over the last 5 to 10 years. We very rarely get any comments on these. So you'll see there at the bottom, the staff recommended seasons for extended falconry.
Any comments?
All right, moving to a different topic. The last time we met, I made you aware of a fairly significant mortality event in tundra swans due to lead exposure at an impoundment on the Mattamuskeet National Wildlife Refuge, which occurred during February and March of 2023. I just wanted to give you a brief update on what's occurred since that event. And the last time we met was last October. I'll start with just going over some of the background for those who might have missed that presentation. So this mortality event occurred in what I'll call Managed Impoundment 4 or MI4. That impoundment is located along the refuge entrance road as you leave the Highway 94 causeway. This particular impoundment is the impoundment on the refuge that they specifically target for public viewing opportunities. It's got an observation blind, and then as you can see, it's got a perimeter road surrounding the impoundment. So not the greatest place in the world to have this type of mortality event, because it's definitely in the public eye. All right, just a brief overview of the timeline of what occurred. So the first swans that were seen dead, and then, which is not uncommon, swans die during the winter, but few swans were seen dead, but what we began to see, or the refuge staff began to see in early February of 2023, was some swans that were standing on the entrance road, not moving, you know, really exhibiting some abnormal behavior and uncoordinated muscular responses. Had a hard time standing up, holding their head up. So the refuge staff contacted the commission, and I say we, myself and my technician went down and assisted with collecting about 24 swans for diagnostic analysis and necropsy. Two of those swans were sent to the National Wildlife Health Center for diagnostic analysis. And when they came back, it indicated those swans died of twice the lethal dose of lead, and likely died within 24 to 48 hours of ingesting that lead. So these die-offs and mortality, it continued through middle February, you know, through March, through most of March, about April 1st. And we estimated that the mortality event probably included between 500 and 600 swans, and maybe that was even a conservative estimate. It was a pretty significant event. Okay, so at that time, you know, we were kind of speculating, but what we thought was happening was the lead that they were ingesting probably came from lead shot. This impoundment was hunted heavily prior to the lead ban in 1991. So we just assumed they were picking up, you know, spent lead shot. We also thought that maybe some management actions that occurred the previous summer, including cleaning of some ditches, interior ditches in the impoundment, and then some disking that was done to improve habitat. Might have played a role in bringing some of that lead closer to the surface and available for ducks and swans to encounter. But we didn't see any mortality in ducks, which, kind of indicated to us that this spent shot was maybe deeper in the substrate where ducks couldn't reach, but swans with their feeding behavior and long necks could get to. So, that's really at that time was just all speculation. What we really needed to happen would be a comprehensive lead soil survey in that impoundment to determine the levels of lead that are actually there. So the first thing that happened, we really needed to understand where those old hunting lines actually were within that impoundment. So based on some old refuge maps, some local expertise, and then some work with the metal detector. I think I mentioned that using a metal detector, found a bunch of old tiles, beanie weenie cans, suggesting where those old impoundments may have been. So this map shows you those old line locations relative to the management actions that occurred the previous summer. In blue there are where the ditches were cleaned, and then the gold box there was the relative area they were doing some disking. So that was really good information, what we really needed to start with any further analysis. So the refuge contracted with the BBJ group to conduct a comprehensive lead soil survey. This particular map shows you the white squares are where several core samples were taken throughout the impoundment, and particularly in adjacent to some of these known for what we thought were known blind locations. And as you can see, this was down to a depth of 0 to 6 inches. So a lot of those samples came back actually, with lead levels in those soils, which would be expected from naturally occurring lead soils in the area. But however, many of those shown here with the red dots had lead levels. So the core samples had lead levels that were above what was considered by the Environmental Protection Agency to be safe levels for avian species. So that was at 0 to 6 inches depth. This is similar to what I just showed you, but depths down to 6 to 12 inches, and to a lesser extent, we saw the same results. We had many of those core samples come back with lead levels above what they consider safe for avian species. So with the known blind locations, other thing I'll mention, in terms of lead pellets, we only found lead pellets in one of the swans we need crossed, and no lead pellets were found in any of these soil surveys. So that, I'll get to that in just a second. But okay, so working hypothesis. This is just my professional opinion. I think it's shared with some other scientists who've been involved in this project. But what we think happened is, since we found very few lead shot, either in the birds we necropsy or the soil samples, we believe that the lead that was once there is now dissolved into the soils in the MI4 impoundment. And what I believe happened is, and this has happened in our own impoundments before, these swans happened to find something they really liked in the winter of 2022 and spent an inordinate amount of time taking the above ground portions of those plants, and then even the roots, the tubers, and the rhizomes. So this is what I expected to see when the water was taken off in the spring of 2023. You can see these craters, or what I call eat outs, where swans were actively foraging. And you can imagine the amount of sediment that these swans were filtering to get to these plants of above ground parts and below ground parts, and as they foraged. So that was a shot taken, I don't remember the month, I think it was early summer 2023. Okay, so what I believe happened is this type of feeding behavior led to bioaccumulation very quickly of lead in swan tissues and organisms. It doesn't necessarily have to be lead shot, it's just the amount of lead in the soil, how they filtered it, led to their demise. And I think that the soil core samples certainly, indicate that if we have an issue or the refuge has an issue with lead levels in that particular impoundment that are above what we consider safe for avian species. So going forward, could this happen again? Absolutely. Other than, doing a large scale project to remove these soils, I'm not sure what they can do. But certainly, this is an isolated event, but it has occurred in the past. But it seems to be separated by decades. So, that's all speculation on my part. This could happen next year. Fortunately, it didn't happen. Repeat itself this past winter, but certainly I think this could happen. It's kind of a lot more questions than answers maybe, but this is at least what I think occurred in the latest update we had.
Question, now, was this area flooded this past, duck season, or was it left dry?
No, they flooded. I think I mentioned that they were kind of trying to figure that, the refuge was trying to figure that out last time we met in October. And I made it known, our opinion, as we discussed, we didn't want to see this repeat itself in the winter of 2024. And I think not flooding that impoundment, or at least not putting as much water on it, was our preferred alternative. I made that pretty clear to the refuge. I believe they started that with good intentions to do so, but they encountered a bunch of rain, just hard for them to keep the water off of it. So I won't say there were normal water levels, but they were certainly not above what I was comfortable with. But fortunately, this didn't reoccur.
What about the mortality rates? Was there much?
We didn't see anything any different than a normal year in terms of mortality, of just natural mortality and so on. Some of them may be wounded, and just died there. But, we always pick up some birds, send them off, but nothing out of the ordinary for winter of 2020. Yes, sir.
How long does it take for lead to usually dissolve, I guess, if the soil is like that?
That's a great question. Well,
25 years.
we know this lead shot ban was in 91. So 25 and a half,
But it's just lead.
at least we think it's gone now. So
you couldn't find it.
I think it's probably 15, 20 years. I would surmise, but I'm not really real clear on that response. That's just what I think.
That was good study.
Related question, would the lead pellets be more likely to dissolve quicker, closer to the surface? You mentioned that cleaning the ditches and disking might have brought it up.
And they've
brought up lead
done that in the
pellets.
past as well, as when the first time they've done that. I would think, and I'm not an expert on this by any means, I would think that, anything that's right on the surface, it's all slow, it's surrounded by substrate, but like I said, I'm not an expert. I just speculate about that. It's a good question.
Doug, is the lead absorbed by the plants, or is just this sort of part of the dirt itself?
It's part of the soil itself.
It's not absorbed by the plants?
No. So they're getting it by filtering that substrate out of their bill, out of their melee as they chew on and forage for vegetative plants. So they're getting it from the soil. It's bioaccumulating the organs very quickly, evidently. Pretty, if you were there, it's not a pretty sight.
Well, it's so, and then the sole source of this lead is lead shot. It's not a natural occurrence or anything like that, is it?
Well, there's always natural occurring lead in any source. But what we found was that the lead levels in the core samples were above the background level of lead in soils in the area, that the lead levels that were found were above the EPA guidelines as safe for avian species.
Which was probably more than likely caused by using lead shot for years and years and years.
But that didn't exist until probably 30 years ago. That was the old like shoreline. and a house was built after that, but it was actively hunted. Since the refuge was established, for probably 40 years. That's a lot of that shot.
Is your hypothesis still that the digging out of the ditches could have, helped this occur? And if,
I don't think that's conclusive.
Yep.
I don't, I think core samples really told us. It gave us the full story as I understand things and I speculate. Like I said, that's my own professional opinion, but I think the data supports that.
any other questions for Doug?
All right, so.
Additional comments?
So to finish up here, I did want to bring to your attention a very large collaborative research project in the Atlantic Flyway on mallards. We are a part of that project, and I just want to kind of quickly go through some of the things we're trying to learn. So really the impetus for this project was population trends of mallards over the last 25 years. In eastern North America. So in the graph on the right, in gold, you can see that our surveys in the U.S. portion of the Atlantic Flyway indicate that over the last 25 years, the mallard population has declined by about 40%, whereas in the eastern survey area in Canada, our surveys indicate that population is actually stable and has increased, particularly recently, by 30%. So not fully understanding, why these two populations are taking different trajectories. It's really difficult for Atlantic Flyway biologists to make informed decisions on mallard harvest management. So this kind of kicked off this study. Oops. Okay, so to really fully understand, as I mentioned, the two trajectories these populations are taking, we really have to look at mallards in terms of the full annual cycle. So when we're talking about mallard demographics and full annual cycle, I mean, this includes the time from when they breed to when they leave in the fall for their wintering areas, through spring migration, and again back to the breeding areas. So that's kind of the direction we're taking with this study. As you can imagine, just given the scope and scale of eastern North America, it's quite a daunting task to look at this in terms of the full annual cycle. So we put together what we're calling the Atlantic Flyway Research Collaborative. This involves 14 state agencies, including the Wildlife Commission, the Canadian and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. Ducks Unlimited has been a great partner, and then our two university partners that will help us kind of put together this data and analyze it and kind of help us understand what it's telling us. So really how we're collecting this data is through two types of marking devices. The device on the left is called what we call a backpack transmitter that fits on the back of a hen mallard, and it's attached to the body of the mallard with a special harness. This specific transmitter records GPS locations every hour. And then some behavioral data that I'll mention here in a few minutes is collected every 6 to 10 minutes. And that data is actually bounced off cell towers and back to the researcher. So it uses cell towers rather than satellites to transmit information from the actual transmitter back to the researchers. And then we're putting on hen mallards again, what we call geolocators. They're basically just devices that track light levels. And I'll get to how those are important here in just a few minutes. But the goal of the project is to mark at least 1,200 hen mallards over the course of 4 years, 2022 to 2026. This is the second year of the project. Thus far, we've almost marked 1,000 hens with these backpack transmitters, and then another 800 hens with these geolocator devices. All right, so this map, at least on the left there, is what's displayed here is one of the mallards that our staff marked in 2022 in February. You can see that bird's still alive, and today it's on its 5th migration from North Carolina back to the same area it bred over the last 2 years. So it's pretty cool stuff when you can see a bird going back, basically the exact same place as the year before. So some of the things we can learn, you know, in terms of migration, certainly, you know, number one, where our birds are going from North Carolina, whether it's the U.S. portion of the flyway or into Canada. We can, you know the distance migrated, the earliest, the initiation date of migration, determination date of migration, and then get a little bit of data on where these birds actually stopped along the way and identify some really important stopover areas that may or may not be in need of protection. And then obviously, we can look at what types of habitats these birds are nesting in, and similarly on the wintering grounds, how they're using their wintering habitat. And as you can imagine, with, you know, collecting data once every minute, and you've got, you know, almost 1,000 mallards marked, the amount of data we're collecting is it's just phenomenal. It's unbelievable. It's almost unmanageable, but that's why we have our university partners to lean on in that regard. So I talked about behavioral data and some of the things these transmitters are collecting. The backpack transmitters collect behavioral data every 6 to 10 seconds. So what that means is it collects information on the orientation of the backpack and the bird, whether the transmitter's here or there, or it's going side to side, or it's moving up and down. So it gives us data in three different planes, the X, Y, and Z planes. And we can use some machine learning algorithms to actually convert that data to specific behaviors, which is very important as we're looking at differences in productivity between mallards that breed the U.S. portion of the flyway versus those in Canada. So, you know, we can convert that data to behaviors such as whether they're resting, preening, whether they're feeding, whether they're flying, when they start laying, when they're incubating, and then, of course, as they move to the brood rearing period. Going back to these geolocators, as I mentioned, they're light meters. So it's important that we have these because we can kind of really hone in on behavioral data by having another way to look at when birds actually move between their normal behavior to egg laying, to incubation, to brood rearing. So as I mentioned, these geolocators are located on the leg of a hen. They can determine the amount of light. So, you know, before breeding, you know, probably a lot of light there because the hen's moving around, walking around, and so on and so forth. But as she begins to lay eggs, she's solitary. And as she starts sitting on eggs, that light level decreases immediately, you know, over the course of 26 days of incubation period. And then, you know, as light levels increase, then that indicates that hen's actually taken her brood from the nest if it's successful and off, you know, to raise that brood somewhere else. So the geolocator is just to check on the behavioral data we're collecting from these backpack transmitters. But, you know, all that together will just give you, like I said, just a magnitude of information. In terms of our, so where did our birds go? This map shows you the locations or the summer locations of birds that were marked in 2022 and 2023. And you'll notice that some of the birds marked here in North Carolina, these are North Carolina birds. Some of our birds have moved as far north as the Hudson Bay lowlands. That's quite a migration distance. That actually represents some of the longest migrations we've had of any birds marked in any state or province. And actually one of the more northern locations we've seen nesting mallards in the Atlantic flyway. It's playing out where the farther south these birds winter, just like the farther north they move. It's interesting, but you can also see that our birds seem to have an affinity for the Great Lakes region. We've seen the same thing in our band recovery, so this is not unexpected. But, you know, the majority of birds that we've marked, thus far, the 43 we marked for the first 2 years, 60% of those birds went to Canada, 30% stayed in the US states, or some US state, and then we had a few transmitters fail and a couple of birds died. But for the most part, we've been very successful with our marking efforts, as has most other state provinces in their efforts. It's just been a really good project thus far. For the birds we marked in February, January and February, this past winter, 25, all of those, other than one that died prior to migration, have begun. 23 have begun migration. So we did have one bird Saturday out in North Carolina, but those birds are on the move. So we should have the same type of data here for the birds we marked in February this time next year. Okay. So in terms of our methodology, it sounds pretty simple. We throw out a bunch of corn, get some ducks on bait, throw a rocket net over it. But I can tell you, winter trapping for duck is difficult, very time consuming for staff. But I will say that well, the other thing that really makes this capture effort problematic for us is we just don't have, compared to states north of us, large concentrations of mallards in one place. So what we've had to do is pick places like Mackey Island National Wildlife Refuge that has historically wintered tens of thousands of mallards for our capture sites. We just can't go anywhere and catch mallards. So that's one of our main capture sites. So I think what I'll do now is just show you a day in the life of the duck trapper in February, in a net shot where we actually caught, I think about 20 hens, which was our target, and then another 40 great mallards, and then a handful of ring-winged teal and a few black ducks. Cute that video. You can't see much of the ducks we caught, but they're in the backside of the net, on the canal, die, and it drops off. Like I said, we caught it was 100. So,
That's over your limit there, Doug.
yeah, it's a little bit over the limit, but we try. So any questions on the Mallard project or anything else presented, that we can take those now.
Do we have any questions?
When they're migrating back north, how far per day do they typically?
You know, it depends on the bird. You know, some of them may move 600 miles in a flight, others may stop 3 times. So it really depends on the bird. That's some of the data we haven't put together yet, but I'm interested in that same question. You know, all species are different. Woodcock, I showed you the woodcock migration, you know, last year. You know, woodcock are different than ducks. That's always an interesting question, how long they're flying between their stopover sites. Many, as much as 600 miles, as little as, you know, 50, just depending on where it's going to.
Any other questions for Don?
Those,
Right.
southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina, summer mallards, there were just maybe 4 or 5 died. Are they, making this black ducks?
The question is whether our mallards are maybe.
You had a few in the summer shot from last year and 22 that were in southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina. I know our problem with mallards hybridizing with black ducks. Do you guys go out and visit any of those to see if they're nesting, and if they are they with black ducks?
We are trying to confirm across the flyway, if hens are producing successful broods. But we're not really specifically looking at that introgression of the gene pool from mallards to black ducks, although I didn't mention it, but we're doing a similar study with black ducks, collecting the same information at the same time. So that'll be interesting. We can put that together, maybe touch on some of that, but obviously, now I think at least I'm speculating that one of the reasons that the mallard population has declined in the U.S. portion of the flyway is just a sheer fact of the number of game farm mallards being released in that area, and maybe we're seeing a reduced fitness of wild mallards in the U.S. portion of the flyway versus those in Canada that don't encounter mallards as often as we did here in the U.S. So, good question.
Any any other questions for Doug? Thank you very much for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Much appreciated. With that, adjourned.
Big game.
Do a roll call for our big game committee, members, committee chair, David Boyle. Committee vice chair, Les Seegers. Committee member John Foley.
Here.
Committee member Tom Barry. Committee member Steve Linda.
Here.
Committee member John Alexander.
Here.
Yes.
This time I'll turn it over to Brad. Brad, take note that we're starting 15 minutes late. I'll watch it. It's no problem. I'm not very long. I'm pretty concise and on point all the time. So we should be able to catch up, folks. It depends on where we go. You know, so I would always say, first one, thank everybody. We got a pretty good agenda, I think, some interesting things. I'm gonna real quickly go through the reported deer and bear harvest for this past deer season and bear season. As you can see, we had a all-time record high deer harvest, 189,000 plus, almost 190,000 reported deer harvest this year. So that's a good trend. You can see our deer harvest trend for the last 4 or 5 years has continued to climb. Definitely upward trends in the mountain region continue, and coastal region has stabilized a little bit for, yeah. There's the harvest by season zone. Western season is note the change is the changing over the 3-year average, because that's the best way, as you guys, many of you guys know, that's the best way to looking at the change from year 1 to year 2 is not telling us as much as where does this relate to the 3-year average. We're up 9% above the 3-year average in the west. You see the central zone jumped way high this year, 20%. But everybody had a significant increase over the 3-year average. We kind of asked some questions, and we'll be looking at it to as we do our hunter harvest survey later in the year, and that's how we calculate our reporting rate to see, that's how we find out, how many deer, or estimate how many deer were not reported. So we're kind of curious to see if the reporting change rate moves a little bit with the advent and the switch to go outdoors and possibly making it easier to check and report your deer. So we'll continue to watch that, but based on deer hunters I talked to, they had a good deer season. So some of this is likely just simply increasing that. I think I figured out the trick. Keep the thing off the slide. Yeah. We're exploring the slide transitions. Just out of curiosity, I thought you guys might like to see the harvest by weapon type. This is statewide. And you can see that, as I've said before, when firearm season opens, that's when our deer harvest skyrockets. That's when it goes. But, consistent trends in bow, crossbow, and black powder, across the board. Switching now to the bear harvest. Bear harvest again, all-time record high. I think reporting rates are less of a factor with bears. We tend to have really good reporting rates for our bear harvest. I think our bear population continues to grow and our harvest rates continue to go up. It was record highs in all three bear management unit areas. 88 is an all-time high for the Piedmont bear management unit. Broke it down a little bit here with some other interesting facts. Mountain Bear Management Unit, it was 1497 was a total. That's right at 35% harvest rate, which is lower than we want it to be over there. That's the reason for our changes that were proposed and are in consideration right now. We're trying to increase change the composition of that harvest, get that female harvest rate up in the mountains to help us meet our population objective. In the Piedmont unit, and I also added a category to watch the percent skill hunting to see how that's changed. That changes through the years. About 35% in the mountains. The Piedmont is all still hunting, of course, for the most part. 40% male, 88 bears. That's a record in the Piedmont. Going up. Bears are coming to the Piedmont. Coastal Bear Management Unit, now this one gets a little bit more interesting, 26, almost 2,700 bears. Right at 47% female harvest. Yeah, a lot of pressure on that coastal population. 43.4% across the entire coastal management unit was still hunters. But I thought these were some more interesting numbers as we look at our zones. Zone 1, which is the peninsula, the big, all of us becoming big bear country. They don't even kind of refer to it as big. Everywhere there's big bears in the coastal plain now, but if you look at that zone 1, I thought a couple of interesting things there. We're at 45% female. We got a couple research projects and some reconstruction models going on. That may be okay for stabilized there with the amount of refuge and sanctuary that's there. I thought the interesting number in zone 1 was this year the reported harvest was 57% steel hunters in zone 1. And then you can see the other zones there too. 2 is interesting in that percent female is 51% up above the sound. So they're pretty pressured. It's 368 bears total, but and then zone 3 is really where the vast majority, or not, maybe not the vast, but a significant majority of our bear harvest comes from that zone 3 counties. And they're at 49% female, almost 50-50 in kill there. And more dog hunting there, less kill hunting in that zone. That's still the dog hunting still the prevalent method there, 34% still. And then you can see zone 4 is that adjacent to the Piedmont zone continues to climb. 40% and 40% female and steel in those. And then down south in zone 5, second highest harvest, but a lot of counties down there, 43% female and 44% killed by steel. Any questions about deer bear harvest?
Did you have good participation with people submitting the molars?
Yes, we continue to see, the compliance rates where we need them to be for that, yeah. And we've run into situations where my tooth got lost in the mail, blah, 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 but for all, what's the rate? Do you remember, Colleen?
Currently for 2023 season, it's at 86%.
Wow.
But Peter's still coming in.
And they're still coming. Which is going to lead to our population reconstruction models. This is the 3rd year of mandatory reporting. So this is the 3rd year we'll have that high level of reporting rate. So our reconstruction models are going to be as accurate or, as precise, I should say, as they've ever been now with that kind of input into the models. So we're looking forward to that, plus input from the Mississippi State Bear Population Estimation Study that's coming in a year to really put into our bear plan and set the guidelines for what the next 10-year bear management plan will look like, what the coastal bear zones might look like. They could change, season harvest recommendations, those kind of things. All that's coming in the next couple of years.
I've got a quick question. Are we adjusting the percentage of female harvest up a little bit? Is there killing more? It seems like they're harvesting more, like it used to be about 43%. Is that what it was calling? And we're kind of like 47 to 51%. So do we, bears are handling it. Do we adjust what we think?
Well, that's why we're doing that big coastal bear study. Right now, the metrics we currently have show that the population in the coastal bear management unit, again, at the unit level, not at the zone, at the unit level has stabilized. Age at harvest is slightly declining for both male and females. In fact, this past 2022, we don't have the age results for 2023. The 2022 harvest, they were the lowest age at harvest, coastal males and females since 1983. However, we're getting all the teeth now. So that might be why that age at harvest has decreased as well, because now they're getting all the teeth, not just the teeth from the big bears that used to be older. So that could be more reflective of what's actually occurring overall in specified. So with that big coastal bear study, that's going to give us a population estimate, density estimate, and that's when we can look at zone level in addition to our population reconstruction to see at the zone level what's going on. And it could be at one zone, their population is increasing, and in another zone it's stable decreasing. That's what we have to do. Right now, because of the heavy female harvest, that population is stabilized, which is what our objective is. Yeah, we'll know a lot more, when we get those results of the study.
Thank you. Stay tuned.
Just, you know, it indicates, you know, the harvest pressure on the bear population. You see those, that's the things that always make us look at. But we got a lot of things in the works that, like I said, in a couple more years, we're gonna have a really good picture of what we do and where we go.
We'll have the best data in the country
Yeah.
regarding that bear population. We will. Yeah.
Is there a way to tell the sex of a bear when you're out in the wild, when it's walking around?
Size to some extent, and that doesn't always apply to. I mean, if you're shooting a 300-pound or under bear, it could be a young male, it could be a female. I mean, you got anything that, I mean,
I would say with enough experience, like I can tell by looking at the feet. Sometimes you can tell by looking at the head. Males tend to have, you know, when they get older, very small ears in relation to the head. So there are physical characteristics, but I would say your average hunter, limited bear hunting experience, probably would have challenges. Yeah.
I mean, I think some of the dog hunters, especially the ones out in the mountains where they're treeing bears or getting them up in the trees and they're looking at them really good with binoculars. The obvious way can sometimes be obvious because they can see them through the binoculars and stuff. But still hunters, bears walking by you. I mean, there's a few things, but it's mostly deciding what size bear they're going to shoot.
Thank you.
All right. I'm gonna move us along and Chris is gonna give us an update on our CWD sampling results from this past year. And then transition. Stand here like this. See, don't get it up there. That's that. Okay.
All right, we're technologically challenged here, some of us that are presenting today. Good morning, glad to be here. My name is Chris Craig. And we have one of our common topics now. It's not necessarily my favorite topic, that's CWD. And I want to start real quick with a very high level reminder of what CWD stands for, chronic wasting disease. And sort of making that point, it's right there in the name, the word chronic. It's very important, chronic, think long-term, think slow acting, think it's a marathon, not a sprint. In terms of it being a problem for us, yes, it's a problem here in North Carolina, it will be forever. It's not the flash flood that took out the Setzer Fish Hatchery. It's not something that, you know, explodes like the headlines say. It's more like the slow drip in the plumbing in your basement that slowly rots your foundation over lots and lots of years. So kind of keep that in mind as we talk about CWD. The other thing, just to kind of preview here today, I've got a lot of good news to tell you about. You know, I tend to be the old crusty guy on staff that, you know, sort of pessimistic, but it's really hit me in the face in looking at some of these numbers recently. I want to highlight some of the really good stuff that's going on. And the first one is just what an incredible look we got at our deer herd in regards to CWD this past year. It's outstanding. We were able to collect the necessary tissues and test over 36,000 deer across the entire state. That's not just in our surveillance areas, that's statewide. That is fantastic. That was a massive effort by the staff of the agency. I think we had help from every single division. It wasn't just wildlife management, it was and fisheries assisted, a lot of enforcement officers were very, very involved, but the Raleigh office were involved. Certainly our lands management crews were very heavily involved in that. So it's really incredible. And if you kind of put the numbers to it there, 36,000 deer, that means we sampled nearly 1 out of 5 deer that were reported harvest in the state. That's incredible. That really gave us a fantastic look at the state's deer. All right, so let's go down into the weeds of that just a little bit. There we go. All right, so down in the weeds a little bit on that. We have received the test results back from nearly all of those samples that we send in. There's a couple reasons for that. We're continually sending samples in. You know, we pick up road kills or depredation kills at this time of year, so we never truly get to 100%. We also have, just in the process of doing all that, you know, UPS lost a couple boxes of samples. We sometimes get confusion. Sometimes we get an inconclusive result. If tissues were degraded before they were collected or the wrong tissue was collected or something like that. But that's a pretty small thing. roughly 2% of those that we don't get our test result back. So that's really, really good news. Okay, here's the absolute best piece of news we can hope for out of 36,000 samples. We did not find CWD infected deer in any new counties within the state. That's almost a jump up and clap our hands kind of. That's really, really, really good news. Now you may recall last fall, we did put out the word about specifically about a deer that was harvested in Johnson County and a deer that was harvested in Franklin County, and about those being CWD positives. And so this jumped down into the weeds of that just a little bit. That was the initial test result that we got. Since that was during hunting season, we wanted to put that information out to the public. But our procedures for all CWD positive results that we get back from the lab is to get a second check on that from the National Vet Services Labs, And we did that with these two samples as well. And that's essentially the Supreme Court of the disease testing. And they basically overruled and made a final decision on that. But they said what was seen initially as light staining that could potentially be CWD, they made a final determination that was not CWD. And the fact that we didn't turn up any other positive deer in those counties would also support that decision. So that's really, really good.
Question,
Yes,
were those like blind, testing? Did they know it was from Johnson County, or did
they didn't know where they were from. They were looking at those without some presumption of whether it's positive. So we did have 13 new positive samples that we found this year. And like I said, it's not, it's really good news that those were coming from places where we had already identified. It's also very good news that the number of samples that we found was relatively low considering how many we tested. So we had 13 new ones, 5 in Cumberland County, 5 in Surrey County, 2 in Yadkin, 1 in Stokes. So no surprises where those came. Okay, and when we combine that with the last 3 years of intensive surveillance that we've been doing, that brings our total number of known cases up to 24. So the one county that was already a known county that we did not get another CWD positive deer from this past year was Wilkes County. So we're still at 1 total in Wilkes County. And if you look down there at the bottom, that means there's another one of those good news pieces. So 24 total positive cases out of 60,000 deer that we've tested in the last 3 years of sampling. That's really good news there. And it's also very good news, even when we look to the counties that we know are infected. We actually see a pretty low percentage of positives in those counties as well. So this is just for the last year in surveillance area 1, 2,000 deer roughly collected in each of those counties, and just a very small handful of positive cases amongst that. So that's very good news. Same type scenario down in Cumberland County, although we had fewer deer collected, tested from Cumberland County, lower deer densities, lower harvest rates there, so lower opportunity to test deer. But the positive rate there is still just slightly over 1%. So that's really good news. All right, so let's go into the weeds here just a little bit of which deer are coming up as positive and what does that potentially tell us about the disease. So in this past year, we saw the same kind of trend that we've seen before. It's tending to show up in bucks and it's tending to show up in older deer. That's not surprising either. Bucks travel more, they interact with scrapes, they interact with other deer, and then so they're more likely to pick up the infection. And older deer have simply had more time to pick up the infection. That will change over time. We will see more does in our positive rates. And we'll see younger deer that are infected. But this is also confirming for us that we are relatively early in terms of being infected with CWD. Collection sources, we have a variety of ways that we can collect those samples. We have taxidermists, we work with meat processors, we've got freezer drop-offs, we've got staff check stations, lots of different ways. And in this past sampling year, as it has been in previous years, the gold standard, the greatest gold line that we have out there is that taxidermist program, simply because early detections show up there first because they're dealing with trophy bucks. They're looking at older male deer for the most part. those stats don't change a whole lot when we combine everything from all three of our most recent years. You know, you still see that it's coming out primarily to be male deer, primarily to be older deer. There are a couple of those that we have seen in that sample. And when you look at our collection sources, you still see tax numbers kind of coming out on top but all those have been valid and good ways to do surveillance. So looking ahead a little bit into what would be on the horizon for this coming deer season in terms of regulations. Staff has kind of dug down into this. There doesn't seem to be any need to recommend or proclaim different primary or secondary counties. So that leaves us up in surveillance area 1 with 4 primary counties of Surrey, Stokes, Wilkes, and Yadkin. There's the surrounding counties there would be those secondary surveillance area counties where we did not confirm positive deer. But we would also want to do surveillance there. And then in surveillance area 2, which is down here in the eastern part of the state, of course, our primary county would be Cumberland County, and then we have those surrounding counties as well. But that's not going to change from previous years. That's good news. Good news for the public. It's good news for our staff to not have to expand that or add details that folks have to get up to speed. Mandatory testing dates. We feel like we have done a really good job of surveillance. We've gotten really good cooperation with hunters. A lot of our service health cooperators and taxidermists have been very good to work with. We don't want to stop mandatory testing completely, but we can dial it back. We can make it a little bit easier on the hunting public, the hunters out there. So we're really thinking that we can accomplish what we need to do with a 3-day sampling period, mandatory sampling period up at surveillance area 1. That'd probably be like Saturday, Sunday, Monday of the opening of the rifle season. And in surveillance area 2 in the east, we can probably fall back from a 2-week period that we had last year. We can drop that back to just 8 days. So essentially just 1 week during the gun season. Okay, so touching on a lot of good news. And kick it back to Brad here in a minute. I'll just make a couple of comments here about, where do we go with CWD and beyond? A lot of those good news pieces that I'm kind of pointing to there is because I want to emphasize for our staff and the commission and for our public and folks that are listening in. We're actually finding ourselves in the point now where the actions we take for the next few years can be very, very effective. You might say the horse is out of the barn. Yes, but it's not necessarily out of the pasture. So the things we do with maintaining our hunting culture, maintaining our harvest rates, those can be very good at this point in the disease infection. Continuing to message to our hunters, especially in those focused primary counties, about the risks of moving carcasses, keeping it where it is, not giving it a ride to new areas. That can also be very effective. Continuing to put emphasis on messaging about concentrating deer at feeding sites outside of hunting season, those kind of things. We're at a point where those things can be effective. And we certainly want to still keep surveillance is something that we do and options for hunters to have their deer tested that have concerns about it. So that's a good message. It's a good, if you're gonna have CWD, we're in a pretty good position. All right, Brad, I'll pick it back.
Just hanging out up here.
Chris,
Yes, sir.
we understand in the northwest, northeast, when we had it in Virginia, the Lincoln, that a buck can walk during rut and everything like that. Cumberland, why Cumberland? Any hypothesis, you're up here, and then you come down 95 and you're down here. I can't, and you had how many more positives in Cumberland this year?
So there's no reason to think that our surveillance area 1 and surveillance area 2 were necessarily connected. It didn't necessarily spread from Surrey and Yadkin County to Cumberland County.
No, that's not my question. Why would it just pop up in Cumberland when our whole concentration area is in the northeast?
Because CWD would make long distance moves either by carcasses or live deer being moved long distances. It did not likely get to Cumberland County simply from deer dispersal.
What's the amount of deer farming in Cumberland County versus the northeast?
I really, I don't know about numbers in the Northeast, and honestly, I don't really even know about numbers that might be in Cumberland County.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
All right, hang up. I do want to point out that this is, Hayes Queen, this is one of our biologists, little boys, he gave me permission to. This is why we're acting right now. You know, for him and potentially his kids one day. I thought that was the perfect picture to represent what we're doing here, because it's not gonna impact us other than take our deer somewhere, bone out our deer or whatever. Mr. Chairman, the sampling period, mandatory sampling period and the surveillance areas can now, be executed annually by proclamation from the director. And that was, you saw staff's recommendation, and I think Director Engel would like concurrence from the committee that we're good with, no changes to the surveillance areas, a 3-day mandatory in the Northwest and a 1-week mandatory in SA2 in the East. I don't know if that needs a vote or just a general concurrence. Everybody good with that? Very well. So we'll be working on that proclamation here very soon, so we can get that information in Great Digest. The rest of the time frame was slotted basically for, as this says, next year and beyond, and I will turn it over to the chairman to sort of lead some discussions, some questions that you have. I want to go back to one of the things that Chris said, and a lot of good news in this. We certainly appreciate the commission's support for really allowing us to go a bit overboard. We didn't really anticipate that we would get the kind of response we got statewide and sample, you know, close to 20% of our reported deer harvest. That's really unprecedented. And I feel much more confident standing up here this year talking about this as to where we think CWD is. Now, I'm not going to say it's not going to pop up somewhere else next week. It could, but after 36,000 samples pretty much distributed across the state, I think we know where it's at. So that pushes a step closer to drifting into what does deer management look like in those CWD primary counties where we know it is. What are our harvest objectives? What are our tools in our tool bag? And so we're starting to contemplate that. We're starting to think about that. We're starting to think about what, if you remember in our legislative package a year ago that we got CWD bonus tags approved as something that the commission can issue. So, you know, in those counties, we can make those tags available to either sex tags available to any hunter that wants them, that wants to take extra deer in those counties. We don't even really have to take regulatory action on that. We can just basically make them available and put the logic in, go outdoors that says this is the only place you can use these tags, and it's done. So that's on our radar. When we do that, we're already using our chronic wasting disease. We call it CWD map. We're already using that in our primary counties because there's no acreage restrictions. If you have land in those counties, you want to be in CWD map. The requirements for that is you have to submit the deer you kill for testing regardless of the mandatory period. And we can get other age structure data from that as well. But so that's a tool that's already being employed. But you know, I think you'll see us slowly starting to get into more of a you know, cruise control surveillance in some of these areas as we move along. We'll keep, it's probably more important that we keep a watch on the surrounding counties. We know it's in Surrey County. We know it's in Cumberland County. We know just, you know, it's right there. You know, we know it's in Stokes, Yadkin, and Surrey County. There's one lone deer that showed up in Wilkes. And David Sawyer's real happy about that right now. But you know, so we know it's there. So our results there is going to be keeping up, helping hunters get their deer tested if they want to. And, you know, and there's questions we have about where do we go with that in the future? Is it, you know, do we continue offering testing that way, or is there another mechanism to make testing available to hunters? I think I think there's some cool stuff on the horizon that we're not right there yet with some of the testing options, but it's coming. But,
Touch
question?
on, you know, I know we're going to scale back a lot. The target for the number of tests we're going to do this year, or
we have a target, a sampling target, sampling goals that are set. I don't, off the top of my head, I didn't write them down and I don't remember.
I couldn't tell you the numbers. It's considerably less than what we did last year, and it's also importantly, books online here. I can't tell you the exact number, but it's less than what we did this year, and it's also a multi-year target. That gives us a little more flexibility to try to reach that. You know, we don't have to try to get it all in one year. We can be a bit more strategic in how we do that. And honestly, Brad's done a good job of, you know, kind of clarifying, we know where it is. That's not necessarily where we need the testing. We need the testing more in some of the counties that have been under sort of sampled in the past to double check the places where we think it's not.
we're still leaving coolers out, we're still going.
Yes, same methodology, maybe dialing those back a bit this year.
You know, one of the things, you know, our servant health cooperators, which are basically our taxidermists and meat processors, you know, we found the magic number to get them to completely participate, and some contribute a lot. It's $20 a sample. We won't need that many next year, so we're working on different options for that program to back that off just a little bit. We're not gonna do away with that, because that's absolutely the best way, especially our taxidermists. That's the best way to find it. That's our statewide surveillance tool. We're, you know, if it pops up somewhere else, we're probably gonna find it through that path. But staff is still working on what the servant health cooperator program is gonna look like next year. You know, we didn't just exceed expectations this year. You know, we blew them out of the water. We had no idea that we were gonna get that kind of response from that, but that's great. We know we can do that. Another thing is, you know, I've talked to Kyle about, you know, we can turn this on and off. You know, if we want to do in 5 years or 10 years, you know, a $30,000+ or 30+, yeah, I wish it was 30+1,000, a 30,000+ deer sampling in the state, again, we can turn that back on. It's easy to do, but right now we don't necessarily need to do that. After this, I feel pretty good about that. So those, we'll keep the freezers out. I feel like we have an obligation still to make sure if somebody wants their deer tested, they have a mechanism to do it. They can get it tested. I didn't really talk a lot about our testing turnaround times and those kind of things. Just as an FYI, our wildlife health program, and Chris Turner sitting over here, he's supervisor for that now. They put together a really great report summarizing a lot of our testing and sampling stuff this year. I'll be getting that out to you guys along with the harvest report stuff. In Margo will be sending that out in the next couple of weeks or so, and it's a kind of an executive summary of a really thick document with all kind of stuff that we're looking into and trying to figure out. So it will look the same. It'll just be scaled back.
Chris, quick question. They said that the Cumberland County was probably a man-made example. Can we use that as a teaching moment for our hunters across the state? Do it in a way that this is isolated. This is why it's isolated. We can do better.
I'll let the director wants to comment. But I think, yeah, movement of animals in general is always going to be continuing to be one of our messages. You know, CWD jumps long distances by that mechanism, whether it's live animals, dead animals,
right?
What have you. So that's always going to be part of our message. Yes, sir. Sure.
Yes, I also have a follow-up, anyway, probably a good time to do it, but the, you know, going back to Commissioner Wyndham's question to staff too, it's you know, the why what we do know is that we act fast and we educate the public on a massive scale. And the transportation, you know, the Cumberland County case, when we scratch our heads, I mean, we blame or we attribute, let me say it like that, our Virginia borderline cases, and I pick on our folks, friends and colleagues of Virginia. about our bordering counties on the Virginia line. But yeah, I think that the transportation, the education, what we're using on the Cumberland County is reiterating in our communication tools about the importance in this detection phase of North Carolina, which we're still in, about the transportation. And it's a law enforcement issue. You know, I go back to that, you know, if we look at Cumberland County, the makeup of the population in Cumberland County, we can just speculate right now, and we can reemphasize the fact we need to control movement of deer and carcasses and the importance of disposal right now. And, you know, when Cumberland County popped up, we started looking really hard at all bordering counties and you know, the community outreach up there. It's at a high level. So, you know, there's really no good answer to Cumberland County, but y'all know that we spend days, weeks, months, and years trying to figure it out. And you know, when we do, we'll tighten the regulation.
Yes, correct. You know, I think one of the first things that Mariah said in his presentation, when we went up there in the Northwest to everybody, you know, the $1 million question is everybody wants to know where to come from, how to get it. But the truth of the matter is we'll never do that. We can't point the finger. You know, we got lots of working theories, but we can't. And at this point, it's there. So now it's our responsibility to manage to the best that we can.
Chris, on one of your first slides, you had 12 wells in there. Those road kills or dead ever found and tested.
Those came from, yes, basically any dead elk that we could get our hands on, for testing. Your road kills
And North Carolina Indians.
and on the Cherokee. So,
More touching on that, just very long time ago.
and that was actually a couple of years worth of samples that the Cherokee had been holding up. Those didn't all die within that year, but the test results were sent in and came back. Actually, I should have, that's a great, that would be a substantial number of elk that died in 1 year. But some of those, I think that was maybe 3 worth of samples that they had, for whatever reason, they held back and we didn't have. Good cover.
And we do collect from roadkill and depredation kills, which we do have a few elk still. We do collect GWD samples from those.
Any other questions?
I got one colleague. You know, we heard about the bear mange up in Virginia. Have we had any instances down our way at all?
We're not aware of any bear in North Carolina that we confirm symptomatic with falcon mange. That can be disposed. We disposed them to state that's 4 or 5 years ago, in which they collected blood and harvested bear actually in Hyde Terrell County. And they found titers to show they were being disposed, but not becoming symptomatic. Which is good. Well, you know, no bears are credited by off a lot of comparison. I suspect if we start to see symptomatics or falcon mange, probably most likely here in North Carolina first. When you look at Pennsylvania and where those cases are, then through Virginia, kind of following the Appalachian Mountains. I was just on a meeting yesterday morning with Southeastern Culture Wild Study at the UGA. They're doing a multi-state mange study, and they are interested in why North Carolina hasn't shown a positive case. That's hopefully good news. As Chris said, COED, also with mange, it's great news. We haven't found it, but we're not sure why. And they're trying to figure that out, why certain states are having cases and some cases, severe cases, and other states like North Carolina have not. There's no clear pattern, except they think it has to be something with specific might, those who they're specific, and must be their genetics. That's the second part of the study. The other thing though is when they looked at bears with mange, it's about 79 to 80% of bears survive. So, you know, less than half of bears succumb to the symptoms caused by mange. So that's good news too. And once they survive and recover, they have a stronger immune response to future exposure. But yeah, we are monitoring it. Certainly, I get photos quite often of bears with hair loss. But that hair loss can be for a number of reasons. Even fungus. California is finding cases in which they thought the bears had mange, and, it's actually caused by fungus. Other times it's hair loss due to disruption of the endocrine system, or just summertime loss. But we're monitoring it. We suspect, and a bear has, mange. We send it to SQUIZ for confirmation. And so far, the sarcoptic mange, which is the severe one, we haven't found it. But yeah, we're monitoring.
Okay, thank you.
Have we given any thought in looking forward? Looking at that picture as to what deer hunting will look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Not so much from, I guess what I'm trying to say is from the impact of CWD. It's like a termite, you know, the house doesn't fall all at once, it's a slow, and it's going to spread, we've got it. What is that going to do to how staff approaches deer hunting over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Yes, we've given a lot of thought, a lot of roundtable discussions, both at the office and not at the office. I think it's, I kind of make the statement, I don't know that it's jokingly, you know, I spent an entire career working on changing the way we manage deer herds, older age class buck management, pushing more equal age classes, you know, allow for that yearly dispersal to occur, the whole premises of old age class management, quality deer management, whatever you want to call it, get a whole generation of hunters that have bought in hook, line, and sinker. And in these counties where we have CWD, we're gonna have to flip that upside down. We need to limit the dispersal. Older bucks have prions more frequently and they spread them more often as they live longer. It's not meaning we're gonna not have older bucks in our population, because we always have for 30 years of deer management plus. So I think, going back to a little more, higher bag limits, season timing. We spent all this time talking about season timing and getting it timed right with conception. We want to let the yearling buck dispersal occur and all that stuff. You could see us come back with recommendations in 5 years in these counties to adjust the season time, to bring it in earlier in some places. So I think a lot of stuff's on the table. I mean, the first thing I did after we sort of got everything figured out is to challenge our deer management team, which consists of our deer biologists and a lot of our DBs and stuff. I said, give me we know traditional deer management, which is maximum sustained yield, quality deer management, which is old age class. Give me the white paper on CWD management. What are our objectives? What is our parameters for our hunting seasons? The one thing we want to do is keep hunting on the landscape and keep hunters shooting deer. So, that's the number one thing we want to do. We got to keep hunter satisfaction out there. They have to believe there's an opportunity that they can see an older age class buck. So we don't want to do away with that concept altogether, but minor adjustments are probably coming in the future as far as, hey, let's CWD bonus tags for one thing. They'll be real popular in Cumberland County and in a lot of those areas because, hey, they're going to be 2 more buck tags if they want them. They're probably not going to use them, all of them, but but they'll get them. And if some people use them, that helps us. But that's not going to be statewide. That's going to be very focused on those primary. There's no reason to have that in, Montgomery County right now. We just keep managing deer herd the way we've been managing them right there. Those counties. We don't need to change our management philosophies in those counties right now. It'll be targeted to those counties where we need.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Jared.
And I'll kind of end on the fact that we're talking about all good views, so we've had record bear harvest, record deer harvest, and we were definitely on track with that. It will be a topic in the future, but hopefully not too long.
I'd like to look at it as good news. We don't really.
That's what we're, it's good. People complain about that you can't find deer, bear.
Exactly.
Get out.
That, I will say, I got us back on time, but
Absolutely.
3 minutes to spare. Put that in the notes, whoever's taking the
I
notes.
appreciate Chris even said that we ran over the 4 o'clock.
Oh, yeah, fish ain't got nothing to talk about, though.
We'll be
Thank you,
adjourned.
Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to call Fisheries Committee meeting to order. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded for public record. Recording the meeting will be available at www.nclaw.gov.
So roll call for our fisheries committee then, committee chair, John Stone.
Here.
Committee vice chair, Steve Betham.
Here.
Committee Mr. Tommy Humble. Committee member Brad Stambat.
Here.
Committee member Eddie Rogers. Committee member Mike Oliver.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have.
Thank you, Mario. I'd like to call Fisheries Chairman, or Chief Christian Watershow. We're giving all 4 presentations. If we need to stay on time, we'll, push the state fish hatchery.
Yes, sir. All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, we'll begin, with rulemaking. Got 3 items dealing with rulemaking today. So the first group are related to our annual rule cycle that is coming up. We're currently getting ready to start our 25-26 cycle. These rules, for reference, would become effective in August of 2025. So we're more than a year out from when these would become effective. This is the typical kind of handout we give you. To make it a little easier, I also did it as a PowerPoint. We have 10 total proposals. 8 of those are related to trout and public mountain trout waters. So I will quickly go through these in case there are any questions. The first one would simply remove the hatchery supported trout water section on Henry Fork in Burke County. That is another case. This would be a broken record through this presentation. Another case of public access, posting against trespass. So there is no public access and really no access for stocking. So we propose to remove it. The second one would reclassify the hatchery supported trout section in on the Linville River within the U.S. Forest Service's Linville Gorge Wilderness Area in Burke County to wild trout waters. This is a situation where part of the stockings occur on property of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Blue Ridge Parkway is not, the Blue Ridge Parkway currently has a policy that will not allow for the stocking of streams. And so therefore, because of that and because of what the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service also, that area is very difficult to stock, and due to the safety of our staff, we're going to just move that to wild waters. All right, so the next one is for the Hungry River boundary. This would modify the boundary for hatchery supported trout waters. This is another situation where it is on private property and is currently posted against trespass. The next item would remove hatchery supported trout waters section from the Little Rock Creek in Mitchell County. Again, that is on private property and has been posted against trespass. The next 2 deal with the Ararat River, and this is really just a clarification and also an extension. If you look at the bottom one first, this would clarify that the delayed harvest trout water section is a section of river that is adjacent to the Ararat Greenway, but is downstream of the NC 103 bridge. So it's just simply clarifying that if you're downstream of that bridge, you're in delayed harvest trout waters. If you're upstream of the NC 103 bridge along the Greenway, that is hatchery supported trout waters. And they have added to that section of trout waters by about half a mile, or to the Greenway by half a mile. So therefore, we're proposing to extend the hatchery supported trout waters by that same distance, approximately half a mile. So the next one would be modify the lower boundary of hatchery support trout waters on Big Rock Creek in Mitchell County. Once again, situation where it's on private property and it's been posted against trespass. And then the final trout proposal would be to modify the lower boundary of delayed harvest trout waters on the East Fork French Broad River in Transylvania County. Once again, that is on private property and it's been posted against trespass. So the next two proposals are one deals with crappie and one deals with striped and white mullet. The one for crappie would simply establish the 8-inch minimum size limit and 20 fish daily creel limit for crappie at Sharon Harris Reservoir. And then for striped and white mullet, this is associated with action taken by the North Carolina Marine Fisheries Commission. We would reduce the daily creel limit from 200 fish to 100 fish. And there would also, we would establish a limit of no more than 400 total per boat. And that is to be consistent with the striped mullet FMP Amendment 2. And those are our 10 proposals for the next annual rule cycle, and I'll take the opportunity to take questions if anyone has them.
Anybody have any questions?
I got one.
Yes, sir.
One real quick. Posted against trespass.
Yes, sir.
It keeps coming up in your conversations on our mountain waters. We've stocked a lot of these before. Have these properties changed hands? Is that the primary thing?
That's the primary thing that's happening in our mountain region, generally speaking, is that we have agreements with older landowners. And as those older landowners pass on and it gets moved to either their children or their heirs, or it gets sold. And in many cases, these are larger landowners that get sold into smaller pieces. And then it only takes one or two of those smaller pieces to post against trespass before it really becomes ineffective demand.
Do we have an outreach program to work with those folks?
Absolutely, yeah. And in all of these cases, these are generally years in the making, where our staff, fishery staff, enforcement staff, we have been out there continuously trying to figure out how we can make it work for them. There are some instances where we've improved access, at our expense to make it easier so that the folks aren't just randomly wandering on somebody's property. Of course, we've got an outreach campaign about littering and making sure that you don't, respect someone's property. But in many cases, these are folks that don't even live in state. And once they purchase the property, it's just, they just don't want anybody near their property or on their property.
Thank you.
If there's no any other questions, I'll move on to, oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, our.
Great fisheries.
Move on. All right, so we'll move on to temporary rulemaking. Okay, so the first one is a temporary rule that we are basically required to do so that we stay consistent with the marine fisheries as well as what is required of us in statute. And so many of you have heard about the mandatory fish harvest reporting. This was a situation where last fall, October of last year, the General Assembly passed Session Law 23-137, and it requires reporting for 5 species, recreational reporting for 5 species, starting December 1, 2024. Those 5 species are flounder, red drum, spotted sea trout, striped bass, and weakfish or gray trout. Those species occur in coastal waters, they occur in joint waters where we have authority, and they occur in inland waters where we have authority. So even though the legislation requires that the harvest be reported to the Division of Marine Fisheries, it is really you as a commission that can legally require that through rule. So what this is a temporary rule that would establish that any individual who harvests flounder, red drum, spotted sea trout, striped bass, or weak fish from joint fishing waters or inland fishing waters adjacent to joint or coastal fishing waters shall report the required information to the Division of Marine Fisheries. And we are working with Division of Marine Fisheries on this. They are developing I guess, a web form at this point where people can report. Ultimately, there will be some form of app and hopefully a telephone number that will allow reporting as well. We've been working on the temporary rule. Marine Fisheries is working on temporary rules as well. They will be meeting tomorrow in a called meeting in order to pass their version of this temporary rule. We also have an outreach plan that we're working on. Most of the outreach will be done through Marine Fisheries and through their website, but of course we'll support and supplement that as we go forward. But this would have to be effective December 1st of 2024, and is, like I said, required by statute. The rule text will be in your packet tomorrow, and we'll be presenting this tomorrow for approval to take it to public notice for public comment. And then we'll bring it back to you in June for actual adoption. Any questions about this one?
You've seen the Marine Fisheries will sign off on that.
Yes, sir. We have, myself, Kerry Ruhlman, Major Lucas, a number of us, have been involved and met with them, you know, twice, 3 times a week. And you make a good point. I mentioned too also that this applies to recreational and is what we have to do, but this also applies to commercial. So they have a separate rule that will deal with commercial. And for commercial, they currently have to report if they sell their harvest. The statute now will require that they report anything they harvest, any species. It's not specific to this 5. It's any species that they harvest, regardless of whether they sell or not. It has to be reported.
Does that include bycatch, things that go?
No, this would be considered harvest, and that was part of what we went through going back and forth, is defining what harvest is. So bycatch is actually, from a biological standpoint and a management standpoint, considered dead discard, not actual harvest. That's theoretically measured in a different way.
What is the penalty for not reporting your fish?
Okay, so there's a phased in enforcement. So the first year, so December 1 of 2024 to December of 2025 would simply be a verbal warning. Becoming in December of 2025 to December of 2026, it would be a written warning. And then it's not until December of 2026 where you could actually be cited. And then once it's, I think it's an infraction, and it's, I think $35 is the penalty. I'm seeing heads nodding, so.
Thank you. How in the world are you gonna enforce that? I mean, I come in my boat and I got 2 gray trout on it, okay? I'm not gonna go in there and pick up the phone before I clean my fish. Oh, I caught 2 weak fish. Are you telling me you're serious about this?
Yes. I mean, so the state legislature has put this, you know, on us, and, you know, we'd like to make the best of it. And so that's absolutely what we're trying to do. There'll be a lot of education and outreach to go with this. And really trying to explain what we're trying to accomplish. It's very different, and some people, some of the staff will will shake their head, but I mean, this is a little akin to big game harvest reporting. It is a little different because you fish multiple days and you have multiple harvests, and if you fish a lot, you would have to report a lot, but we're hoping to make it as seamless as possible and get as good a data as we can.
See, everybody on this side of the room agrees, we think.
Any other states have done this, and has there been a good take rate or any results or data that's actionable that?
So that's, I'm pausing because that's a little, it's debatable, if you will. Marine Fisheries says that there really hasn't been, and that this is the first of its kind. And it probably is from the perspective of the size and scope. But certainly, this has been required, elsewhere in terms of very species specific or area specific. But to do it, for 5 species coastwide is pretty unique. And then to require commercial folks to report everything they harvest, regardless of what it is also pretty extensive.
Any other questions?
Tim, I think you were gonna,
I was just gonna answer Commissioner Wyndham's question, as this would be extremely challenging. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
okay, we'll move on to the next one. So the next one is, also related to marine fisheries, but is maybe a little simpler. This would reduce, you already saw a permanent rule just a minute ago. This would reduce the daily creel limit for striped and white mullet from 200 to 100 fish in aggregate, and establish a limit of no more than 400 fish total per boat. So basically, this is a temporary rule that would go ahead and put it into place prior to we could getting a permanent rule. And this is because the Marine Fisheries Commission, this is their preferred management option. They agreed to that at their last meeting, and their next actual scheduled meeting, which is coming up in May. They will approve the plan, which will approve this change. And then the Marine Fisheries Director will put this change into place via proclamation. So all we're trying to do is be prepared to be able to be consistent with the proclamation that we're anticipating coming in the next few months.
Right, we can't do that.
No, sir. No, sir. We don't have right now, we don't have the proclamation authority. We got to do it through temporary rule. So this will be brought tomorrow also as an actionable item.
Any questions?
Okay.
Christian, get that.
Yeah, so I'll make this fairly brief. This is, I'll say for me, is a bit of a shameless plug, if you will. Just to talk about some of the great work that Watson State Fish Hatchery is doing. And what I really want to do is invite you and encourage you to stop by the hatchery, visit the hatchery, take a tour of the hatchery and see the work that they're doing. And right now is as good a time as ever because they got striped bass on hand. They're producing or spawning for hybrid striped bass. So there's a lot of work going on right now at the hatchery. So just the background, the Watson State Fish Hatchery, it's a warm water facility. It's in Pender County. So it's just up I-40 from here, a little over 30 minutes. We acquired, or the agency acquired it in 1992 to meet our warm water fish production goals. In 2006, there was a major renovation of that facility. So while that's almost 20 years old now, it's still fairly state of the art. Jeff Evans, who is pictured down in the lower right here, is the long-time superintendent. In fact, he was there from the very beginning. And he, along with 3 other staff, so 4 staff total, run the facility.
Is that striker one that y'all had, is that a mama that You getting eggs from, is that what that's for?
Yes, yes, sir.
Fine. Pretty good fish to be in the hatchery.
So the facility itself,
Frederick said.
yeah. So the facility itself is, has a production building, which is about 12,000 square feet. There are 38 earthen ponds that are used for production. It's all designed to be able to, move tanks and different things around in order to grow different species, whatever is the need of the agency. And the species that are currently produced are striped bass, Bodie bass or hybrid striped bass, channel catfish, white catfish, sunfish, and even walleye. So in 2023, the total production there was 3.7 million fish total. As you can see, the kind of the main ones there, striped bass, Bodie bass, and I'll skip the channel catfish. Those are kind of the bread and butter of what the hatchery does. But they also do sunfish, like you see, bluegill, red ear, red breast, and as I mentioned, they do walleye. And they just received walleye, I guess, last week or maybe yesterday, actually. Those fish come from Table Rock where they're spawned and produced. They come down to Watha for a Eastern vacation, if you will, for about 30 to 45 days, where they're able to grow, and they grow real well, and then they'll be trucked back and stocked in the western part of the state. So another kind of way to see how and what Watha does is based on how they allocate the pond space. So this is for 2024, Jeff's plans to allocate pond space. 56% of the ponds will be for striped bass grow out. The 19%, right at 20% will be for hybrid striped bass grow out. And then you can see channel catfish at 10%. So that's again the main three species they often work with. They also have some for white catfish and bluegill, and then there's that 10% walleye where they're there for just a brief period, really, to grow. So what's new at Watha, this is pretty exciting for us, is that we are now looking at doing the reciprocal Bodie bass production. The original cross to produce a hybrid striped bass would use a female striped bass and male white bass. And that has worked for years, and we've done that since the 80s. Actually, the 70s is when some of the initial work was done, at least in our state. But there's a reciprocal version, which basically takes the female white bass and uses male striped bass. And so, because of issues of getting broodfish over the last few years, we have begun working, or the hatchery has begun working with doing the reciprocal cross. So now again, they're using the white bass females and the striped bass males. And that allows us to do domesticated or cultured broodfish. So we don't necessarily have to go get wild fish every year. And so they've been holding captive white bass that we received from North Carolina State University, their Pamlico Aquaculture Center. We've been holding some of them for several years now, and we've been using the males for our hybrid striped bass production. This year, we used the females, and in fact, just last week, Jeff and crew, they spawned 142 females, and basically worked from about 6 in the morning until midnight to get those eggs. And then they're using the striped bass males to fertilize those eggs. And we are holding striped bass broodfish as well. And the current group of fish that they're using are actually collected from the Cape Fear back in 2021. So they've been holding them on station now for about 3 years. And the goal this year is to produce about 400,000 hybrid striped bass using this reciprocal cross. So that would be about 50% of what we'll be doing, or the hatchery will be doing for the year. And the big benefit of this is the reduced effort in obtaining brood fish. It's a lot of staff time that is saved by both field staff that are actually out sampling for brood fish, as well as hatchery staff that are transporting those brood fish. But then it also is very big because we do have concerns about the health of the populations from which we're getting brood fish from. And then, of course, we're always gaining biological knowledge anytime we do this type of work. Right. So that was it. It was very short, just a brief update, introduction. I'll repeat I'll take questions, certainly depending on what you want to know. Jeff Evans, this is his crew here, but Jeff Evans definitely is the person you can talk to. And again, I would strongly encourage you to take the time at some point, whether it's just for an hour, stop by and see what Waffle's got going on. It's very impressive.
The new way that you're crossing the hybrid bass, it produces larger hybrids.
There's some research out there about the difference and what it does produce. And so there are some additional performance that potentially come with that. But it's really, for us, it's much more about just simply it's better production and ultimately it'll depend on the production of the system where you're putting them as to how well they grow.
Oh, no, I think bigger fish, is a good idea. I mean, I think that's a valid reason.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Christian, you got us, not only on time, but finishing up 5 minutes early.
Okay, folks, housekeeping. Landon, will you go over our protocol plans for?
Call to order the meeting of the Land Acquisitions and Property Committee. Remind everyone, this meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. Recording of the meeting will be available at www.mcwildlife.org. And next, I'd like to call on Margot Winkler for a roll call.
Do a roll call for land acquisition and property committee members. Committee chair, Tom Berry. Committee vice chair, Brad Stamba.
Here.
Committee member, Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Committee member, Ray Clifton. Committee member, Kelly Davis. Here. Committee member, Landon Zimmer.
Here.
Mr. Vice Chair, you have a forum.
Next, I'd like to call on Land and Water Access Chief Darren Barnes for rule proposals for land and water access.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've got 2 pages here we'll talk about. So first off, every year when we go to public hearing, we get our public comments back, especially the written comments. They're sent in on the website and we go through those comments. And if there's good comments, we may bring those forward to you as rule proposals, but we obviously have some that are out there that we choose not to move forward with. And this year, kind of the popular comment, get a lot of different comments, but the popular one out there, which is well known to us, is the issues about dog deer hunting engagements. But since this is and it wasn't any particular game lands, more of a general comment across the board. Since we're going through a short rule cycle here, we chose not to move forward with that topic. Push that to maybe another time to talk about that. So that was our proposal that's not coming forward from Land and Water Access Division. Now to move down to our proposals that we're moving forward with for the 25-26 annual cycle. We have 6 proposals, and these proposals are generally sort of administrative in my mind. There's not a lot into these, but I'll run through really quick for you. The first proposal would prohibit target shooting on Cold Mountain game land in Haywood County, and that game land is where our range is at. This Cold Mountain range is already out there, so usually if we have a range within 50 miles, we prohibit target shooting on those game lands. So that had been an oversight of the rules, so we're correcting that. Our second proposal adds the Bates Bay River Tract, Pamlico County, to the Goose Creek game land. This is a new tract that we just acquired. And we're adding that in. We actually just did a site visit there yesterday with representatives from Joe Bud and Tom Tillis's offices. And, this will be added, and we're gonna have it be a permit only for deer, bear, and turkey, everything else not be permit. Just for those 3 species. Our third proposal is on our Bull Rock Game Land. So we did here again, we're adding a new tract. This is our Bay River. We're adding the Spencer Bay tract to this game land, and before adding the Spencer Bay tract, we only had 1 impoundment, so we never worried about calling it by its name. Now that we have 2 separate impoundments, this rule will identify those 2 impoundments. The impoundment that is already there is the one on the Outfall Canal tract, and that one's called the E. Merrill Edwards Loop Road Waterfowl Impoundment. So it will retain that name, and we'll put that in the rule to distinguish it from the new impoundment, which is going to be called Willow Point Waterfowl Impoundment on the Willow Point tract, which is that new Spencer Bay acquisition. Questions about that one? Pretty straightforward. And the obviously permitting on the new Willow Point impoundment will be by hunting. The new Willow Point impoundment will be by permit. Our fourth proposal is a proposal to limit the use of bicycles on designated trails on the Johns River Game Land in Burke County. And that limitation would not apply to hunters engaged in the act of hunting during the open days of applicable seasons. But otherwise, it would restrict bikes to designated trails. Our 5th one would then, on our Lantern Acres game land, this one will actually restrict, so we already have that impoundment as posted waterfowl. Those waterfowl impoundments are for permit hunters, permit hunting only. And what this proposal does is then say all hunting within that waterfowl impoundment is by permit. So if a person was, what we've historically had with people come in to snipe hunt, do other kinds of hunting on that impoundment on off permit days, and so we're trying to control that and say any hunting on that impoundment needs to be by permit. Our last proposal is that the Little Fork State Forest game land was previously a 3-day per week game land, and we're switching that to a 6-day per week game. And this was the forest that used to be called Rendezvous Mountain State Forest, but then was split. Part of it went to state parks, and we retained the other part, which became the Little Fork State Forest. They're switching that from 3 days to 6 days. Any questions about any of these proposals? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward. I'll turn it over to Ben to talk about the property.
Good afternoon. So we have 6 phase 1 land acquisition projects to look through today. We have 6 phase 2 land acquisition projects and 1 other property matter for your consideration. We'll start off with our Buffalo Creek Headwaters tract. This tract is located in Watauga and in Caldwell counties. It's 1,280 acres. It's a very large tract. It's adjacent to our Buffalo Cove game land. So this would be a possible wildlife conservation area or an addition to Buffalo Cove game land. Tax value of the tract is at $6.4 million. We do not have an approximate asking price at this point. Biologically, it's a very significant tract to conserve. There's a native brook trout population that exists on the tract. It is currently protected by the dam that prevents any other stock trout from coming upstream and interfering with this native brook trout population. Conservation of the tract will also provide significant headwater protection to the Yadkin River, several SGCN species downstream. It's adjacent to another conservation project that we'll look at here in a minute. You can see the Buffalo Creek tract is outlined in red, and the Dennis Creek tract, the adjacent tract, is outlined in light green. In a combination, both tracts would add approximately 9 miles of public mountain trout water. So another significant accomplishment that these 2 acquisitions would provide. Potential uses would be angling, hunting, hiking, bird watching, photography, and general nature study. The track scored, pretty good in our scoring system at 4.270. Scored well for overall biodiversity, as well as habitat quality. Potential grants for funding sources to purchase the track include Forest Legacy Grant Program. This year, there were two pots of funding. There was a traditional Forest Legacy as well as a IRA pot of Forest Legacy funds. The hope is to seek funds there and be awarded funds through the IRA pot, which had a larger cap. Other potential match sources include bargain sale, as well as state funds and private funds. And so staff recommend phase one approval of the Buffalo Creek assemblage. Any questions? All right, we'll move forward to our Dennis Creek tract. Adjacent to the one we just looked at, it's 623 acres. This will be in addition to Buffalo Cove game land. This tract does have good access for public access as well as administrative access. The tax value of the property is just over $2 million. We do not have an approximate asking price. It's important to note this is a partnership project between the Wildlife Commission and Blue Ridge Conservancy. There is potential for this to come as a donation down the road. There's a good chance we may be contributing some funds if we would, of course, identify that between now and phase two. Tract will permanently conserve, protect 1.3 miles of native brook trout habitat. There are some native brook trout populations that exist on the Dennis Creek tract as well. Conservation of the tract will benefit headwaters of the Yadkin River Basin. Species that will benefit include brook floater, bigfoot chub, snail bullhead, beadlip red horse, all exist downstream of the Dennis Creek and Buffalo Creek tracts. In talking with Rachel Hoaxson this morning, there were two undescribed crayfish that existed downstream. This tract will benefit. I think those have been named, and Stony Fork crayfish and false crayfish. So these two tracts in combination will meet some large conservation goals for the commission. Uses will be angling, hunting, hiking, bird watching, photography, and general nature study. The overall land investigation score was 4.176. Scored well for habitat quality, hunting and angling opportunities, as well as the species present. Potential funding sources include a NC Land and Water Fund grant that Blue Ridge Conservancy has sought after. Match being Robertson funds or state funds if needed. So staff recommend phase one approval of the Dennis Creek tract.
Are they privately owned?
Yes, sir. Different owners for the Dennis Creek tract and the Buffalo Creek tract. Very fortunate and excited to have Blue Ridge Conservancy as a partner, Dennis Creek tract. Definitely helps. Break to us at a reduced cost. Any other questions? Moving forward, we'll shift over to the northern mountain region. This is the Wood Tract. This is an 87-acre tract in Wilkes County. Protection of this tract will benefit a bog turtle population that currently exists just behind our Wilkes Depot, actually. Probably see it a little better in this photo, but our Wilkes Depot is by the road along that riparian buffer. It's bog turtle habitat and a fruitful bog turtle population there. This acquisition of this tract would definitely benefit by protecting headwaters of this riparian zone. There's about 78 acres of open field that are currently used for agriculture. The hope is that we could transition these fields over to dove fields, potentially permit only hunts since they're smaller fields. Potential uses, like I mentioned, permit hunting opportunities, hiking, bird watching, photography, and general nature study. It scored at a 2.930, scored well for connectivity and buffer for the southern bog turtle habitat, scored well for restoration potential and public access. Potential grants and funding sources will include NC Land and Water Fund, Pittman Robertson funds, as well as state funds as match. Staff recommend phase one approval of the Wood Tract in Wilkes County. Any questions? All right. We'll shift over to the Piedmont. This is a 136 acre tract in Franklin County. This will be in addition to Shockoe Creek game land. Tax value of this tract is at $403,000. The approximate asking price is in the ballpark of $500,000. The overview of the tract, it was identified probably 8 to 10 years ago as a high priority acquisition for the upper tar acquisition plan. So this is a tract that we've had our eyes on for quite some time. And you can see the inholding that's filling in there between the Wood Tract East and Wood Tract West. So a very high priority acquisition for game land. The acquisition, filling, inholding, provide connectivity to those two woods tracts. And the riparian protection along Shockoe Creek will also benefit species that are nearby, as well as downstream aquatic SGCNs, some of which are state federally listed. Loblolly pines exist in the uplands between 25 and 35 years old. All have received their first thinning. Game species on the tract consist of white-tailed deer, wild turkey, and a suite of small game. Our woods tract over here at Shockoe Creek has a very unique habitat type. It's been intensively managed throughout the years, and this is a tract that will bring about some connectivity that we've had our eyes on for some time. Potential uses include hunting, hiking, bird watching, photography, and general nature study. Any questions on this tract?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can you ever identify how they're accessing that property on the infill that won't be pursuing right now?
So I checked in with staff and they're accessing that other inholding through game.
And they have an easement through there already?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And we've also inquired to see if they're interested in selling and they're not at this time. So it's another one we'll have our eyes on, filling in that gap.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other questions? It scored at a 5.256. It scored well for overall biodiversity, compatibility with adjoining lands, connectivity buffer, as well as habitat conservation for SGC species. Potential funding sources will include NC Land and Water Fund. We anticipated scoring well within that program, but all of the frontage along Shockoe Creek that you see on that northern boundary. Other matching sources potentially being wildlife restoration funds as well as state funds. And we have a willing seller here who's willing to work with us in a not so fast timeline. So we will have an opportunity to apply for that water fund next cycle, which will be February, March 25. Any questions? Our next phase one will be the Welch Dean tracts. We've shifted over to the coast. This will be in Chewan County. It's 585 acres. It will be in addition to Chewan Swamp game land. This is a potential partnership project with Ducks Unlimited. This is one that has public access by boat only. I know in some of our earlier discussions, there was concern there. This is consistent with the majority of Chewan Swamp game land. Boating access is, or accessing via boat is very common in that area. These tracts still receive high usage. There is a deeded right of way that will allow us administrative access to the tract. Just will not sustain public use. There are approximately 3.8 miles of waterfront riparian protection here on this tract. Significant habitat for neotropical migrant songbirds. Game species that exist on the tract. The staff have seen are black bear, waterfowl, and gray squirrels. I know this is what I've heard, this is a popular area for black bear hunting. A lot of feed, berry trees that exist through this riparian corridor. Potential uses include hunting, hiking, bird watching, photography, and nature study. Scored at a 3.428, scored well with compatibility with adjoining lands, connectivity, buffer, as well as habitat quality. Potential grants and funding sources include NC Land and Water Fund, Pittman Robertson funds, and state funds. This is a tract that's also part of the Chewan Swamp Natural Heritage Area. I believe it's ranked as exceptional. Important tract biologically that will still have some public access via water. Any questions on this one? All right, our last phase one is the Egypt Road tract. This is 115 acre tract in Brunswick County. It's adjacent to Juniper Creek game land, and it's still in holding Juniper Creek game land. The approximate tax value which obviously hasn't been assessed in quite some time, is 29,000. We do not have an approximate asking price at this time, but we do have a seller that acknowledges that we're tied to appraised value. The biological overview of the tract. There is 1.17 acres of common boundary with existing Juniper Creek game land, forest composition, loblolly pine. Has been burned quite a bit by the current owners, so there's a good understory, healthy vegetation in the understory. Great access from Egypt Road as well as a good internal road network. And there are currently 14 H2CNs present on tract according to staff. There's high potential. This tract is a critical acquisition as this area is upland. Has quite a bit of road frontage. It'll be a prime tract for development, residential development due to that road frontage and well drained soil. So it's one that we'd like to move on. High priority acquisition. Potential uses include big game, small game, hunting opportunities, bird watching, photography, as well as nature study. It scored at a 3.656. It scored well for compatibility with adjoining lands, connectivity and buffer, hunting and wildlife viewing, as well as filling and in-hauling. Potential funding sources will include Mississippi Land and Water Fund in the 2025 cycle, Pittman Robertson funds and state funds. Any questions on this Egypt Road tract?
I'll entertain a motion to move these phase one forward.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Carries. And let's move on to the phase twos.
Sir, so we have 6 phase twos to take a look at. We'll start in Piedmont with our Hancock tract. This is in Halifax County. It will be in addition to Tillery game land. It's adjacent to our current longleaf tract, where we've been doing quite a bit of forestry management. There's a 39.73 acres of forest and about 6 acres of open field that we will enroll in our no-fill program. Tract for benefit management, especially for scrap fire. It'll be eventually thinned and harvested, and in the long term, we will replant with lawn leaves to make it consistent with the adjacent longleaf tract. Potential uses include hunting, hiking, bird watching, photography, and nature study. Scored at a 4.224. One thing I left out, I believe this one went forward for phase one approval in July of last year. So we turned it around fairly quick, but it's still 7 or 8 months there. This one, that's about as quick as we can turn around and appraise and get an offer in place. So scored at a 4.224, scored well for habitat restoration potential, timber harvest potential, as well as hunting and viewing. This tract appraised at $117,500. We offered that exact price. They accepted. So we plan to purchase the tract using Pittman Robertson funds, $117,500. The estimated stewardship costs are at $892 for boundary establishment, removing shared boundary as well as developing an access path. And the total revenue estimate is at $30,000, and this is for a second time timber thinning. Staff recommend phase two approval of the Hancock tract. Have any questions? All right, move forward. Jump over to the mountains in Macon County. This is a 46 acre tract in addition to Needmore game land. The approximate asking price is not the appraised value. It's property did appraise approximately $516,000. We'll be purchasing it at a bargain sale, which we'll get into here in a second. The tract has great aquatic significance. There's spot fin shove that are present in this section of Little Tennessee. There's a bog turtle population that exists in the wetland area of this tract. It's also ranked as exceptional by the National Heritage Program due to these aquatic resources. Protection to the Little Tennessee. And it's also bringing in public access to a previously inaccessible first portion of Needmore game land. Potential uses will be hunting, hiking, bird watching, photography, and nature study. And talking with Rachel this morning, this tract also has great significance and importance for the Appalachian elk species. So definitely benefiting our non-game species. The overall land investigation score was 5.767. Scored well for overall biodiversity, restoration potential, public access, and SGC and species present. As I mentioned, it appraised at $516,755. This is a partnership project with Mainspring Conservation Trust, and we will be purchasing it at a reduced bargain sale of $183,000 with a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Section 6 grant, which is a competitive grant. We received this grant, I want to say, maybe late 2022, in that ballpark. 5-year estimated stewardship and revenue is $23,000 for boundary establishment and to establish a parking area, and no total revenue we anticipate within that 5-year window. Any questions on the flat wetland tract? All right, moving forward. We have our Huckleberry Hill tract. This is in Surrey County. It is 306 acres. It's being presented as a phase 1 and a phase 2 today as it's coming as a donation. This is a partnership project with Piedmont Lake Conservancy. Surrey County, this will be in addition to Mitchell River Game Land. The tax value is approximately $744,000. We do not have an approximate asking price at this point. It's hearings that have come as a donation, free and clear, no funds requested from PLC. Biological overview of the tract. There's about 2.5 miles of the Lay Harps trout stream. Upstream of this tract will also provide about 3,000 feet of river access to the Mitchell River. So we'll further extend our public access that we have to the Mitchell River to the north. Tract will further protect brook floater, dicklip chub, and other SGC species found downstream. This will be, instead of addition to Mitchell River Game Land, it will be great public access for hunting and angling opportunities. I had to step out this morning when Christian presented the fish rules, but I know there's quite a bit of public trout water being removed. So anytime we can add angler access to our public trout water streams, it's a big accomplishment. Even though I believe this is the Lay Harp section. Scored well at 4.444. Scored well for hunting and angler access, hunting and angling opportunities, as well as habitat quality. Donation to Piedmont Lake Conservancy, and the estimated stewardship cost of $17,912. That's for boundary establishment, the establishment of a parking area, and no total revenue. In this 5-year window, staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Huckleberry Hill tract. Any questions? Moving forward to our 5th phase 2. This is the Mayo tract. This one's in Beaufort County. It's an 83-acre tract, will be in addition to Goose Creek Game Land. It is filling and holding forest, and it will also provide excellent game hunting opportunities for deer, waterfowl, turkey, quail, and small game. There are also several SGCNs likely to occur in this area, in this habitat type, including Carolina pygmy rattlesnake, king rail, northern bobwhite, and northern long-eared bat. This tract was clear cut in 2016. The current forest composition is through natural regeneration. They cannot replant after the harvest. It will secure ownership of the inholing Goose Creek game. And I think there's still some vision and some work to be done. You'll see here in the detail map. We still have an inhold in this corner, Goose Creek. It's owned by a family member. I don't think there's any interest at this time. Just having something we're tuned into. Happy to talk when they're ready if they would like to say. The track scored at a 2.533, scored well with for compatibility with adjoining lands, connectivity and buffer, as well as habitat conservation for SGC species. We plan to, what was appraised at $112,000. SPO State Property Office negotiated a purchase price of $120,000. I know we say oftentimes we only pay appraised, and that is the truth. There was some wiggle room. It's a high priority track for us. State Property Office typically work within a small percent margin. In this case, we had the wiggle room was $8,000 additional dollars. State Property Office felt comfortable with it. Staff felt this was high priority enough. We were willing to spend an additional $8,000. We plan to use Pitt and Robertson dollars matched with state funds. And the estimated stewardship, $6,424. This is for boundary establishment, boundary maintenance, as well as fire line development. And total revenue is $0. Staff recommend phase 2 approval of the Mayo tract. Any questions?
That overall land investigation score, I remember we did it several years ago. I don't see any consistency. It's like a 4.5 we like, 2.5 we like, well, why? Because it's nearby. It's maybe not a long years back, even though it's been clear cut, which I don't see how that would be possible, but. I mean, that land score kind of, and. Can we redo that, or can we look into that again?
Yes, sir. That's something we've been in discussions about. We've been talking about, running this through staff. Having staff take a look at phase 1 form altogether. See if there's a way to, because this is truly a conceptual review of the track. We're not looking at funds. Potentially bringing this down to a 1-pager, really keeping it at 30,000 foot level. And trying to bring about a better standard if we are to keep the scoring method. Because really and truly, we have, depending on the region of the state, there's different staff members scoring the track. And some tracks that are extremely important, we've had several in the last year that are new depot construction projects. That should rank at the top because it's an operational need, but because there's no public access, it doesn't score for hunting and wildlife unit. Just about doesn't even score. So there's no consistency, and I think we need to develop a better standard if we think the scoring method is something of value that helps our board evaluate projects.
Yeah, because like it's a donation, I'd say make it a 5, right? I know it's not the case, but, you know, and, just I would think also with climate change, there's some stuff in the lowlands that might be, sounds like going on top.
And the other point you brought up with SGCN species that we list, oftentimes we're listing species that are known to occur in this area. So like you mentioned, the northern long-eared bat don't exist on this track currently, but with whatever our forestry plan will be, whether it's to continue forward with natural regeneration in time, because that species exists in the area, it's likely to support it, but that's the question that comes up pretty frequently. Any other questions? All right, we'll move forward to our last phase 2. This is the Southport White Springs tract. This one came before the board in December of 2020. So it's one that we've been working on for quite some time with the city of Southport. It's 424 acres. It's in Brunswick County. It will be in addition to Green Swamp Game Land. This is adjacent to the swing track where we have recently reintroduced magnificent ram's horn. And that's been the topic in the last year. There's one of the major biological reasons for purchasing the track. There is a gopher frog population that currently exists and reproduces on the track. I wish Jeff Hall was in the room so that he could state it accurately. Maybe Sarah could help me out, but I think there are 7 gopher frog populations that exist in eastern North Carolina at this time. This being one of 7. So extremely significant track, high priority track for us. The habitat that's present supports the gopher frogs, but it also supports the eastern chicken turtle. And there is future habitat potential with restoration work that we can do to establish red cockaded woodpecker populations. They exist just across at the Montse property. This site also has the potential for magnificent ram's horn reintroduction. As I mentioned, we've already reintroduced those populations just across the road on the swing track. Game species present include white-tailed deer, fox squirrel, bobcat, wild turkey, and other small game. And the track will greatly benefit from our prescribed fire program. Potential uses include permit hunting opportunities, as well as opportunities for wildlife viewing and photography. There's quite a bit of staff time that will be spent on this track if we can get it across the finish line. Of course, for management of that gopher frog population, chicken turtle populations, as well as potential work with magnificent ram's horn. This track scored at a 5.811, as it rightfully should, and it scored well for biodiversity, habitat quality, SGCN species present, as well as hunting and wildlife unit. Praised at $660,000, and our purchase price is slightly under $660,000. Through engagement with county and city, There are two proposed carve-outs that you see in yellow. The one on the southern boundary is just over 6 acres. The county would like to retain this area for a potential water tower for public drinking water supply. And the tract or the carve-out in yellow on the northwest corner will be for the city's purposes for a storm debris laydown site. Staff have taken a close look at both these carve-outs. We don't feel as though they'll be detrimental to the frog and the chicken turtle populations that exist. We looked at it with a close eye, and that was part of getting this one to the finish line. It appraised at $660, we'll pay a total price of $636,054. This will be funded with an NC Land Water Fund grant, which we currently have at $318,000, an NC Environmental Enhancement grant at $250,000, as well as a NACA Coastal Wetland grant with Ducks Unlimited at $68,054. Total stewardship costs are $10,702 to establish the new boundary parking area. Total revenue is $0. And mentioned earlier, that this one went forward for phase 1 in 2020. Then we are in April of 2024. I love to name staff that worked with it, but I know I'll leave some out. This was the project that staff are very committed to. They thought it's out a lot of time on reviewing propositions, negotiations for the city and county, and even attending their board meetings to speak towards the significance of this acquisition. So huge thanks to staff there, and this is a big milestone to get this one moving forward to one step closer to the finish. So staff recommend phase 2 approval of the South Fork Light Springs Drive. Questions there? All right, sorry, on phase 2.
Yeah, I'll now entertain a motion to move these phase 2s to.
I'll second this one. I thought this was my other property matter.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry about that. Have one more phase 2 to look at today. This Taylor Swamp Tract. This is a reallocation from NCDEQ Division of Mitigation Services. It's Hertford County, 150 acre addition to Chewan Swamp game land. Being that this is a reallocation, it's viewed as a donation. It's coming forward for phase 1 today. Also move forward for phase 2 approval tomorrow for an exhibit vote. It's a part of the Coleraine Cow Island Swamp Natural Heritage Area, which is known for high ecological significance. It's also deemed a globally important bird area by the National Audubon Society. The habitat on the site consists of mature cypress gum swamp, tidal wetland with an estimated 24 SGCNs present. Also gain opportunities with bear, known to use this area for feeding, and also important habitat for neotropic and migrant songbirds. This tract will be accessed by boat only and will join adjacent portion of the Chewan Swamp Game. Scored at 2.870. Scored well for compatibility with adjoining land, connectivity, and SGC is present. And again, this will be a reallocation from DEQ Division of Mitigation Services. And with our ownership, it's already conserved in their ownership. With our ownership, it will allow public access for hunting and wildlife viewing. Total stewardship costs of $607, and total revenue is estimated at $0. Staff recommend phase 2 approval. This is our phase 2 drive.
Questions on that one?
Does that break our record from going from phase 1 to phase 2 on the timetable?
Yeah, that's about as quick as it'll happen.
I'll now entertain a motion to move the phase 2s to full commission.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. I think there's another property matter.
Sir, we have one other property matter for your consideration today. This will not go forward as an exhibit item tomorrow. This is more or less us presenting the concept of this disposition to you for consideration. If approved, we'll move forward with some next steps that we'll get into here in a second. This is a request from the city of Salisbury for disposal of approximately 9 acres at Yadkin River Gameland. This was part of the High Rock acquisition from back in 2018, 2019. City of Salisbury needs this area to rebuild a water intake facility that will serve approximately 53,000 households. The area will be utilized for their entrance road, their water intake infrastructure, as well as a pump station facility. Current water intake exists just upstream of this area. Things dilapidated, need of repair, in need of a increase in volume, increase in capacity of the infrastructure and handle higher volume. With committee approval, staff will move forward with working with state property office to order a survey of this area, to survey off the approximate 9 acres that they need. We would also order an appraisal at that time, place a value on that 9-acre parcel. And at that time, we would bring that back before the board for final approval. At that time, it would be an exhibit item for consideration. With a surveyed acreage, they value to review and approve. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, we talked about this being in the meeting, but has there been any further discussion about what would happen to the remainder property, or that property that itself the county need in some or all of it?
So I remember Commissioner Berry's question was about a right of first refusal, and I spoke with the state property office. That is something that we can place in a deed when we dispose of property. It's not something that we often do. So it would be an option for us in this particular case, in talking with staff. This is a very low use tract. We feel as though it has very low biological significance. We have to weigh whether or not, we would like to receive it back. We would have to purchase it back essentially from the city if the city no longer had a need for it, or the water intake not move forward to develop. We would have that option.
Would have that option?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We have other access there other than that.
So really and truly, you can't see it well on this map, but you have to cross a portion of private property to access this tract. So there's no, I don't believe there's an entrance road. This is a very low use tract for public. Staff felt as though we weren't losing something. I don't think we'd lose the single hunt opportunity by losing this tract. Now, of course, you could access it via water, but
Pretty much no access right now. No biological.
and there is the Rock Area Protection Act, and that is one for that this piece provides, but given the need and position the city of Salisbury is that for public infrastructure need, we felt it's one of the that go.
How's the city gonna get access to it?
So the city's entrance road, they have an acquisition plan. We're a part of that acquisition plan. They're actually purchasing the adjacent private tracts as well. That's where they'll come in off the road, bring in their entrance road. And the water intake infrastructure the majority of the infrastructure will be on our track with their current design plans.
Is that a power line right away at the bottom of it?
It is, yes, sir. And that's about where the new proposed boundary would be.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I understand public need here, clearly. One question, we need to be very careful here, because we've had other cities and counties come to us for other requests very similar to this. Denied. Simply because, I think for various different reasons. We need to be very, very clear here. If we approve this, a differentiation between this one, the rest of them have been denied. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Clearly understand what I'm saying. Okay, so, because we don't want to get in a jam where we lose the ability to control these things in the future with one bad decision, when we wait against others in other communities come back and say, hey, wait a minute, or come back and say, you did such and such with the city of Salisbury, but you didn't do it for me. And right now, I don't see where we've got a fence to any of the ones between this ask and the other ask we've denied. Okay, pardon? Well, there's multiple. We got one now that hadn't gotten made as far as the commission yet. We did. And we use that as a precedent, already said, on the one that we're dealing with now. So we need to be very, very careful. So and the next thing I want to know, clearly, from the city of Salisbury, because you say this is part of a bigger acquisition, do they have an alternative to get their water supply line other than this piece of property?
Not to my knowledge, they invested quite a bit of time and resources in this route, but that's.
I would want to see a preliminary engineering report on that. There's certain reasons why, because I think we need to be dead clear that we've looked at that, we've evaluated that. Because, you know, we just had a situation in another candidate down here where it was denied, and they did have an alternative, they just didn't like the price. It was cost prohibitive. And so, but I don't know whether that factors into the equation. That's ultimately a commission decision, but I would raise a lot of red flags here. Have some pretty significant discussions before we came back to the commission. Full evaluation. Mainly the reasons that we just went up.
Would the city have condemnation right? I mean, if you ready to keep 3,000 households, I assume they'd have some legal leg on here to say, we're gonna take it when it's gone.
That hasn't come up in conversation yet. It's a good point. Not sure.
City.
I think it would, they just take it.
More or less like eminent domain, being able to come in.
I'm a certain term.
Yeah.
That's why I said, I go back, is there an alternative? And what is that reasonable alternative? What's the limit? You know, can't really ask that question to get a combination until you understand, you know, what other alternatives that they have. And that's why this thing really needs to make sure we don't have a lot of error. I mean, there's a lot of questions here that need to be asked and answered.
I don't think, General Attorney, about, I don't think the city would have condemnation power over the state.
Well, I would have to look into it, but if I had.
I'd like to point out, we're just letting staff move this concept forward. The points being brought up here are things for them to focus on. Another one that occurred to me is the riparian protection, and perhaps that could be part of the negotiation process with the city, that they leave some sort of a buffer that we recommend. We put enough restrictions like that on our disposition of it, it could not be as directly comparable to some of the others that we turned down.
I have no question of evaluating the move forward, I really don't. It's just, we need to ask a lot more questions.
Yeah, I agree. I think before we bring this back, we'll definitely do more investigation. I know the city has produced an environmental assessment for our review, produced a preliminary design for our review. All of that, we decided to bring it back for final approval to be a part of that package for the committee and full board review. Another thing mentioned, I forgot to mention, tracts that are purchased with NC Land and Water Fund dollars or Pittman Robertson dollars do have deed restriction language. This tract was part of the High Rock acquisition. It does have NC Land and Water Fund language, as well as federal nexus language with Pittman Robertson dollars. So during this interim, before it come back for final approval, we would have to gain approval from NC Land and Water Fund, National Heritage, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who could view this tract as being significant, and they could find disposal. So there are quite a few hoops between now and the final approval. Staff can see if there's out of that. That's your wish.
Any other questions or comments? Call for a motion just to allow staff to move this concept forward, bring it back to us later. More detail.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Can we have a discussion on that there real quick?
Sure.
Just to kind of make the point that I think the chairman has made, and some others, that there are gonna be some more questions when we come back, man, we've heard a lot of them. We need to be prepared to answer those. And I like the thought of encumbrances that will accomplish the same thing that property is doing for us right now after it's sold to, and that's one thing that I'd like to look at. But I'm all for pursuing it as a person who's in drinking water out of the Yankton River his whole life, as I mentioned earlier. I'm all in favor of these things, but we do need to be very careful about it.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Passes. Any additional topics? Land and water access acquisitions is adjourned.
Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll start at 2:10. Being live recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. And this time I recognize Margaret Winkler for a roll call of committee of the whole. Margaret.
Do a roll call, so Mark Trump,
Here.
Mark Craig,
Here.
David Hoyle.
Here.
John Foley.
Here.
Les Peters.
Here.
Tommy Caldwell. Tom Berry. Brad Sanda.
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton. Kelly Davis.
Here.
Steve Wyndham.
Here.
Landon Zimmer. John Stone. Hayden Rogers. John Alexander.
Here.
Tom Hickman.
Here.
Casey Cole. Mike Alford.
Here.
Joe Buck.
Here. Thank you, Margot. At this time, I'll recognize my CFO, Jason Cottle, to do a presentation of endowment fund balance and endowment fund expendable income for 2023.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. We'll begin with the overview of our endowment fund balance as of February 29, 2024. As of that point in time, total fund balance was $184,835,429.03. Our asset allocation was, y'all bear with me a moment here, just over 83% in equities and not quite 17% in our short-term investment fund. Expendable income available as of February 29 was $63,544,128.56. Any questions?
Any questions for Jason? All good.
All right, I'll move on to our expendable income. In calendar year 2023, we saw expendable income earned across the endowment fund of $21,419,720.59. This is almost a mirror image reversal of the losses that we saw in calendar year 22. We recouped in 23 about 98% of that. So it's been a good year. The equities market, at least as of this snapshot, continues to perform well. And we've got confidence that the endowment fund will more than meet our needs for upcoming capital contributions. Any questions? And this will be presented to you tomorrow as well.
Any questions? Hearing none, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
This time I'll recognize Brad Howard, 2526 Wildlife Management Rule Proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Darren did in his presentation earlier, we do get a number of public comments and suggestions during the public commenting period. And some of these are, we chose not to recommend for action this year for a variety of different reasons. The list is there. I'll highlight a few. There were several different requests for bear season changes. One was request to prohibit feeding and baiting within certain distances of wildlife refuges. I think that's an effort that some of the public are trying to protect those bears on the refuge. Really, for most of the bear proposals, as we know, we have a bear season proposals in the works right now, bear seasons. So that will probably go for legislative review, so we can't really move. A couple of interesting deer season proposals. The one I thought was interesting was a proposal to request to extend the deer season, open the deer season Thanksgiving week statewide. Nobody hunts deer until Thanksgiving week. We had a request to extend raccoon hunting season, several requests to open the squirrel season earlier to match Virginia's seasons. A couple of requests to reduce the quail bag limit to 3. In all of our discussions and talk about turkeys, we had a number of requests to open turkey season earlier. Not move on that one. Request to end the turkey season on a Sunday rather than a Saturday, which is not an altogether bad request once if we open the turkey season. Currently, turkey season ends on a Saturday. These requests says, why not let us know on Sunday at the end of the season? And then another request for a seniors only special turkey hunting season. Couple of requests for trapping, for year-round coyote, which we have consistently, and, for a couple of requests to extend the trapping season. And we had a few legislative requests. This one was one of my, more interesting ones. We do hear this from time to time, a request to allow spear guns and blow guns for the taking of game animals. That would take a legislative action because those are not lawful manners of take. And then I just wanted to point out, as Darren mentioned in the game land proposals, also with the wildlife proposals, slightly more than 25% of all the comments that we received related to opposition to hunting deer with dogs and landowner conflict issues on private land. So we get a lot of those. Also had a lot of left comments about the bear season proposal and hunting bears with dogs that really went with the bear proposal. Those are the ones we decided not to move on this year. We do have two rule proposals that we are recommending to move on. Both deal with fur bearers. The first is a request from the North Carolina Trappers Association, and it's to establish a definition of a submersion trapping system and apply the 72-hour trap attendance requirements that exist for completely submerged conibear type traps to other legal trap types that are set as submersion trapping systems. Fundamentally, the traps themselves are already legal, they're already in use. Trappers just want to use because it's a submersion trapping system, they just want to use the same 72-hour trap window check that they have for the conibear submersive traps. The second proposal the idea is to change the reporting requirements for licensed fur dealers and move it from a monthly reporting requirement to an annual reporting requirement, which would make reporting consistent with all of our other licenses and permit reporting systems. And we don't have a real need to have a monthly fur dealer report. An annual report from our handful of fur dealers in the state would be sufficient for the management. No, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for Brad? Thank you, Brad. It's time I'd like to recognize Mel Bonner for rulemaking. Adoption. Proposal. Temporary permanent rulemaking, notice of text.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. The first rulemaking item on the agenda today is for the permanent adoption of the 10A 1601 license fees rules, exhibits M1 and M2. The proposed rule was noticed in the North Carolina Register on January 16, 2024, and a public hearing was held on February 8, 2024. We received 1 public comment in support, 10 public comments not in support, and 2 public comments of no preference. This information can be found in Exhibit M1. The proposed amendments to this rule increases license fees by 18.75% for all license permits, stamps, certifications that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission issues and administers. The Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers was used to calculate the proposed license fee increase as allowed by paragraph E of the North Carolina General Statutes 113-270-1B. The proposed fee increase will address funding challenges related to increases in operating costs, interest increases in demand for agency services, and stagnant state appropriations. The proposed amended rule text can be found in Exhibit M2. Staff will be recommending the permanent adoption of 10A 1601 at tomorrow's business meeting. Are there any questions? The second rulemaking item on the agenda today is to notice the rules in the 10H 1800 commercial activity permitting section, exhibits N1 and N2, which includes 10H 1801 general requirements and fees, 10H 1802 commercial use permits, and 10H 1803 event permits. The proposed rules in this section are in accordance with North Carolina Commission authority under the North Carolina General Statutes 113-264 to license, regulate, prohibit, or restrict the public as to the use and the enjoyment of commission property. Under 113-264, the commission may charge a reasonable fee to access or for the use of any commission property. Due to an increase in the demand and access and impact of large user groups, there is a need to regulate and to track the use of commission property by organized entities. For 10H1801, the proposed rule language establishes general requirements and fees for commercial activity permitting. The rule defines commercial activities, uses, and events, establishes information required to obtain a commercial permit, establishes a $100 fee for commercial use permit, and a $50 to a $250 event permit, which is based on the number of event participants. Establishes a $3 per person fee for each participant participating in the permitted activity or event, details general permit records, and reporting requirements. For 10H1802 commercial use permits and for 10H1803 event permits, the proposed rule language establishes requirements for activities for which a permit is required, reporting, insurance, and cleanup requirements. The proposed rule text can be found in N1, and the Office of State Budget and Management approved fiscal note can be found in N2. Staff will be requesting approval to notice the proposed rules and the 10H1800 commercial activity permitting section to open a 60-day public comment period and to hold one public hearing at tomorrow's business meeting. Are there any questions?
Any questions from Melvin?
The third and final rulemaking item. The third and final rulemaking item is to notice temporary and permanent land and water access rules for the 2024-2025 year season, exhibits 01 and 02, which includes 10D-0209 Buffalo Cove Game Lane in Caldwell and Wilkes counties, 10D-0243 Kings Creek Land in Caldwell and Wilkes counties, 10D-0276 South Mountains Game Lane in Burke, Cleveland, and McDowell and Rutherford counties. The proposed amendments to these rules will be necessary to reflect the newly adapted framework if the 2024 annual cycle wildlife management deer rule is approved, shifting the western black powder and the gun season to allow black powder season to begin 2 Saturdays before Thanksgiving and run for 2 weeks, and the gun season to begin Saturday after Thanksgiving and run until January 1. The current year season framework for these game lines is consistent with the western season. The proposed rule text can be found in Exhibit 01, and the approved Office of State Budget Management fiscal note can be found in Exhibit 02. Staff will be requesting approval to notice the proposed temporary and permanent land and water access rules for the 2024-2025 year season to open a 60-day public comment period and to hold one public hearing at tomorrow's business meeting. Are there any questions?
Questions from Melvin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes the rulemaking presentation.
Ms. Hayward, our water safety rules coordinator, will present 1 notice of text and 3 rulemaking adoptions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. As the chairman said, there will be your consideration of 4 rules for water safety tomorrow, 3 final adoptions and public comments received, and 1 notice of text. So for today's purposes, we'll start with the application by the town of Surf City in Pender County under 15A NCAC 10F.0321. Town of Surf City submitted a D1 application and a certified resolution that requested rulemaking to establish no wake zones along the town waterfront east of the Highway 210 Surf City Bridge to mitigate hazards to navigation, maneuverability around bridge pylons and a rock jetty, and for protections for the water recreationists who are increasingly using this heavily congested area. This includes the Surf City Wildlife Access Area, Soundside Park, Sears Landing and Restaurant, Blackbeard's Treasure Campground, and several boat rental and charter fishing businesses. The town of Surf City in their application reported to us the 2020 census data that shows in the 10 years between 2010 and 2020, Surf City alone has had a 108.7% increase in population. And in all of Pender County, there's been a 15% increase in population. The ICW passes under the bridge and bisects the town waters of Topsail Sound. This created, some creative thinking to, write the text for these proposed rules, since the ICW bisects the area and it cannot be regulated per the Corps of Engineers. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Wilmington District was consulted, and they did concur with rulemaking, so long as everyone understands and the town itself understands that the no-wake zones will not extend into the waters of the ICW and setback channel. And the town of Surf City actually is working directly with the Corps on the permits, pilings, and signage placement to clearly mark the regulated areas and when they're within a regulated area and when they're out in the ICW. The town of Pender County also may use the Wildlife Resources Commission's blanket permit under CAMA so that they can install or replace U.S. Aids to Navigation or ATONs at no additional cost to the county or the town. Agency enforcement completed a boating safety hazard assessment matrix, which is attached in your agenda, and staff is proposing 2 no-wake zones. One will be in the waters of Topsail Sound between the town shoreline to the north and to the north side of the ICW setback, and this is where charter boat and boat rental businesses are, and it also includes a portion of Topsail Creek where Sears Landing and restaurant docks are located. In Topsail Creek, there also is a submerged rock jetty that is located approximately 170 feet north of Sears Landing, and the jetty is completely submerged during some of the tide cycles. The other proposed no-wake zone is between the town shoreline on the south and the south side of the ICW setback, beginning east of the bridge and traveling approximately 500 yards eastward. This no-wake zone would include the wildlife access area where there is a boating access area and public fishing area, and the shallow waters of Topsail Sound in front of Soundside Park and a campground. This no-wake zone will extend to the east and will end adjacent to the existing no-wake zone at Deep Creek. And then as part of rulemaking at the commission request, the names, addresses, and descriptions of boating access areas in Pender County that are operated by the WRC will be codified into the rule. Do you have any questions or comments about this before I move on to the fiscal note? Okay. Well, the fiscal note was submitted because the town of Surf City has agreed to purchase, place, and maintain the pilings and the signs that will be required for the rulemaking. And the estimated total cost to be incurred will be $10,600 to the town. There is minimal private impact expected, and there is no state impact expected. Shall we move on to I-1 and I-2? I-1 and I-2 are under 10F.0304. This is the public comments for Bladen County. For the Bladen County proposed amendments, there were no public comments received during the open comment period. One virtual public hearing was held on March 6, 2024, and there were no attendees. Under Exhibit I-2, tomorrow we will request your consideration of final adoption of proposed amendments in Bladen County. These are for the establishment of a no-wake zone at Elwell Ferry and Elwell's Ferry boating access areas shore to shore on the Cape Fear River, and to codify no-wake zones for the boating access areas in Bladen County that are operated by the WRC, and to better describe and clarify the restricted area at White Lake. And all of these were published in the NC Register with an open comment period and public hearing. And the earliest effective date of this rule, should you adopt it, will be June 1st, 2024. Exhibits J1. This is final adoption of 15A NCAC 10F.0310 Dare County. First, we have public comments that were solicited during the open comment period. No comments were received, and one virtual hearing was held on January 23rd, 2024, with one attendee who didn't say anything. So next we move on to the final adoption of this proposed amendment, and you all will recall that this is simply a technical correction that we were requested to make to correct coordinate that defines the no wake zone point that is near the shore of Mott's Creek, the south shore of Mott's Creek at Cape Hatteras National Seashore. And this was published in the North Carolina Register and open comment period in public hearing. And tomorrow we will seek your adoption of the proposed technical correction. And finally, we have your consideration of a request for rulemaking as the result of a petition which would make the no wake zone in Bradley Creek in New Hanover County in the city of Wilmington shore to shore and to extend it approximately 400 feet southeast toward the mouth of the creek. There were 52 public comments received during the open comment period, which ended on March 18th, 2024. And one virtual public hearing was held during that time on March 6th, 2024. 17 comments were received in favor of extending the no wake zone. All of these comments were from District 2, and they represent 33% of the respondents. 35 comments were received not in support of extending the no wake zone, or 67% of the respondents. 31 of these were from District 2, 2 were from District 3, and 2 were from District 4. So I'm going to move on then to, okay, Exhibit K2. This is the request for you to review the assessment matrix and consider adoption of the proposed amendment pursuant to the petition. This would make, as I said, would make the creek shore to shore from the bridge all the way to a point 400 feet southeast, closer to the mouth of the creek. And it was published in the North Carolina Register with the open comment and public hearing. So at the request of the commission, agency staff conducted another assessment matrix and they evaluated conditions throughout the creek, this time shore to shore, all the way from the US Highway 76 bridge to a point closer to the mouth. Boating safety hazards were noted along the lengths of the creek, including the fuel dock that had already been mentioned earlier, the narrow navigation channel, shallow depths throughout the creek that aren't even always navigable depending on the tide, shoaling and safety hazards from multiple docks that extend all the way to the navigation channel from the south shore of the creek, southwest shore. Congested conditions and night boating at unregulated speed outside of the channel are particularly hazardous. Additionally, the canal that is on the south side of Bradley Creek at the end of Westport Drive has hazards for multiple boat slips there. And that will be mitigated by making the no wake zone shore to shore. The revised location closer to the mouth also will slow vessels to no wake speed in more open waters further away from docks. I'd like to add that the distance from the ICW setback to the proposed new location where this revised no wake zone begins is 190 yards. In the estimation of enforcement staff who have monitored the creek on several occasions, including the July 4th weekend, the 190-yard distance gives sufficient time for vessels to slow to no wake speed when entering from the ICW and sufficient time to get up on plane before entering the ICW from the creek. No bottlenecks have been observed by enforcement. So tomorrow we will ask your consideration of this proposed revision to extend the no wake zone, and if you do approve it, the earliest effective date would be June 1st, 2024.
Are there any questions on the notice of text or any of the proposed rulemaking adoptions? It can be on the agenda for approval tomorrow, consideration, approval tomorrow. Hearing none, thank you, Betsy.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we're at the point of additional topics. We're finishing up early. And I have two housekeeping items here. One is, you've already been made aware of, together for 4:45 out front, for the bus to depart at 5 o'clock sharp, to go,
Because I just got a text. He said the bridge is under construction, and so if we could try to have everybody on the bus, probably like 4:40, 4:35. The earlier we can get it out of here, he said that would be best.
Okay.
We can do it.
so leaving this early, and we have one other thing, it's an opportunity, we still got plenty of time to do it. We have 3 of our boats out back, next to the dock, our tactical boats, our coastal boats, we've seen several presentations of over the last several months that we have acquired them. We invited to go out there and to take a look at them, and we might be able to arrange a couple of rides if you want to do that as well. So you've got time to do that. So what's a fair time? Can we Can we meet at 4:30? Can everybody be out at 4:30? Yeah, let's plan on being there at 4:30, and as soon as that bus is full, we'll be on the road by 4:45. Does that, everybody understand that? So if you get left, you get tight. So, okay, 4:30, 4:45. Everybody's kosher for that. Okay. Meeting adjourned.